To the Senate Education Committee. I have 9 o'clock. Will you please rise? Senator Lang will lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first bill is House Bill 129 and Representative Edwards. Bless you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Education Committee. I'm Representative Jess Edwards, representing Rockingham District 31. That's Auburn, Chester, Candia, and Deerfield. Today, I'm really representing very specifically the principal of the Auburn Village School, who grabbed hold of me last fall and really was quite bothered and upset about the law that we passed 2 terms ago. The law that was passed at the time basically was pretty directive in exactly how the school districts and therefore the schools needed to provide hygiene products for menstruating women. And she explained how, because of the prescriptive nature of it, they were spending a lot of manpower replenishing and cleaning up messes and, the hijinks of teenagers and the like. So it had really gotten to be a problem for her and her school. And so she asked me to do something about it. So because I had seen prior attempts to address this law fail, I took an approach of looking at the 28A issue, which is, as you know, we shall have no unfunded mandates. And so if you look at the fiscal note, you'll see a lot of money in there, 1.4, close to $1.5 million. Across the state, that's probably about what it costs using a fairly simple formula that would have been easy to implement. This bill with that fiscal note went straight to Division 2 of House Finance, and I testified, and my principal testified as well about it. And so because it said that the school districts shall provide the products, and it also interestingly said, and the state shall not reimburse for it, it was almost like an overt attempt to set up a 28A conflict. So, so what I proposed was, okay, well, let's pay for it. Division 2 took sort of a different tact on it, and they said, the state is already providing like $1 billion of aid to the schools, and so there are some things in the margin that we can direct them to do that are not 28A violations. And so rather than adding the money, what they did was they went and looked at the language, and they very clearly made a commitment that the schools shall provide these products at no cost to the student. But it took out sort of the micromanagement of exactly how they could do it, so that the school districts and the principals could do what makes sense for their school. And so if you believe, as I do, in delegating power and decision-making to the lowest practical level in which it can be done well, you would appreciate, I think, that these principals know how to make these decisions on behalf of their students. They want to run an efficient school where people are there to learn. So So at the request of Lori Collins, our principal, I'm here today to say that this passed pretty easily in the House, and I hope the Senate looks upon it favorably.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. You have Senator Lang, sorry.
Thank you, Representative, for taking my question. My question is just around the funding aspect of this. So I noticed it's 1.4 in the first year, and it looks like that's a backwards looking number that takes care of some funding, some previous expenditures.
Yes, sir. So I tried to say it, but I wasn't clear enough. The fiscal note was originally there because I proposed that the state pay for it. So so this fiscal note has not been updated. This is actually now at no cost to the state because we instead Division Two amended the bill that I sponsored so that the schools would have additional flexibility and hopefully get them out of the cleaning up the mess of the teenage hijinks and waste that is taking place.
Follow up?
So are we not back in a 28A issue where we're mandating but not funding?
I think that would be a good discussion for a couple of attorneys. I know what Division Two decided to do was to say that if we give them the flexibility, we clean up the 28A issue because we're spending, $1 billion of state money anyways, and this is sort of a de minimis obligation, and we're not in the business of identifying every sort of de minimis obligation to make sure we fund it. So it's a judgment question on whether it's still a 28A issue or not, but this passed overwhelmingly in Division Two when they specifically were looking at that question.
Senator Fenton?
Thank you for being here and taking my question. Why take the products out of the bathroom? It seems like hygiene products in the bathroom, that makes the most sense.
You're making an assumption, Senator.
Oh.
You're assuming that the principals will take them out of the bathroom. What this actually does is it's enabling legislation for them to do what makes sense for their school. By and large, I think it would make sense to have the product in the bathroom, but if they run into a rash of waste and vandalism, it affords them the opportunity to take an alternative approach for a while to reduce and mitigate the waste that's taking place. And again, it's not me. I'm not operating in the school. I just experienced directly my school principal, Lori Collins, being extremely upset that her hands were tied to do something that the schools, in her view, have always done, which is to take care of the needs of these young women to make sure that they have their hygiene requirements met so they can focus on school. That's what we all want to do.
Well, I just want to just clarify. I wasn't assuming anything.
Yeah.
In the bill, it's struck out. That's why.
It takes out the mandate. It does not take out the flexibility of a wise principle to put the products where they belong. We trust our principals. We entrust them with the education of our children. Certainly we can entrust them with the judgment required on where to place these products. This is a small decision compared to giving them our children and ask them to educate our kids.
No further.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Senator Prentice.
It's
You have
okay.
to waive.
Thank you, Chair Ward, and thank you, Representative Edwards. Good to see you. So I appreciate you coming forward on behalf of, you said the Auburn Middle School and their principal, Village School, K-3, thank you. I have not, since this law is passed, I haven't heard of any difficulty with implementation, or I think you used the term hijinks. That's one that, I've often used in other situations. Do you have any other concerns that have come up in your district or that you've heard of from your colleagues where there's this type of problem like they're seeing in the Auburn school?
The short answer is Lori Collins, our principal at the Auburn Village School, we only have the one school in Auburn, was vehement about what a pain this particular requirement, this mandate had become for her and her staff and the expense that they were going through. And the intensity of her complaints brought her to testify in front of Division Two. So if you wanted to hear her words directly, it's still on YouTube. But the short answer to your question is I've not heard from other principals.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much.
you're very welcome.
Thank you. We have a number of people wanting to testify, so at this point, I'm going to have to limit you to 3 minutes. Megan Tuttle.
Good morning.
Morning.
For the record, my name is Megan Tuttle, president of NEA New Hampshire, representing 17,000 educators across the state. I wish there was a neutral position that I could have checked on the box for this, because it's a little weird. So I taught 8th grade for 18 years. I brought the kids to DC for a week at a time. I used to have menstrual products in my desk for any time they needed them. When this bill first came through in 2019, I believe it was, I know Senator Ward was on this committee, and I know I testified before her for that. Our goal here really is to get the menstrual hygiene products available in the bathrooms for students to use, in those bathrooms that those students use. The reason for the bathrooms, the way we see it, is as a 5th grader, 6th grader, whenever you start your period, to have to go to a teacher to ask for something, to have to go down the hallway to the nurse, to have to do those things is a little embarrassing for that child. And so having them in the bathrooms available really takes that step out of it. They're in the bathrooms currently, or by law, they're supposed to be in certain bathrooms currently, and that's where we want them to stay. Ideally, we would love to get this extended to the elementary schools as well. We know that all middle schools don't start at 6th grade. The middle school where I worked in Pembroke for the last 10 years of my teaching career, we had 5th graders. So it would have been available there. In Concord, the elementary schools go up through 6th grade. Through 5th grade. So they wouldn't be available there. But we know that students are menstruating earlier than 6th grade. One of the things about this that I didn't know until I started doing some research a few years ago, as we've heard, menstruating students are missing 2 to 3 months of school because they can't afford the products. If you have SNAP benefits, I looked it up yesterday, you can't buy hygiene products with SNAP benefits. So it's not that they could have money available to buy them and they're just not. If you're using SNAP benefits, you cannot buy these products. And so having them at school in the bathrooms they use really is beneficial to them. Again, they really shouldn't have to walk down to the nurse and ask an adult or to the teacher or whatever to get these products. I think that's all I'll say. Open to questions.
That's great. You stay within the limit. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Ward. And Megan, good to see you again this morning. Just want to confirm, you're talking about making this available, given the different ways schooling is offered in locations. We heard last week about a special school district being proposed that would go from a K through 5 to a K through 8. So there are variabilities that are going to happen locally. So what I'm hearing from you is that you want to make sure that even at some of the lower grade levels that there is coverage available, because young women are menstruating earlier and earlier, and based on the different ways that school districts are composed, we could miss some folks.
Thank you for the
Some young women.
Yes, thank you for the question. That's exactly it. And I'm more than willing to work with Senator Prentice or anybody else to come up with an amendment to make sure the language reflects what we really would like. I think the key thing here too for me is, again, you can't buy these with SNAP products. It's considered a luxury item. And I think all females who are menstruating would agree not exactly always a luxury. So, for the girls that are menstruating younger, we need to have it in the bathrooms available to them. So we would like to see bathrooms put back in. But again, I'm more than willing to work amendments because I know that some districts have K1 and 2 and then 3, 4, 5, different school buildings and then up to the middle school. So there are some peculiar districts, but more than happy to work with you to put some language in that would reflect that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next one is Devon Quinn.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Devin Quinn. I'm the Director of Policy for the New Hampshire Women's Foundation, where we invest in equality and opportunity for the women and girls of New Hampshire through research, education, advocacy, and grant making. And I'm here in opposition to this bill. If you don't mind, I just want to give you a little bit of history about the bill that passed and became law in 2019. Madam Chair, I think that you are the only one on this committee that was there in 2019, so forgive me as I refresh our memories of it. This bill in 2019 started it was sponsored by Senator Martha Hennessy, but really after a wonderful relationship developed between a young woman named Caroline Dillon from Rochester. What's being passed out right now is a really lovely article from the Concord Monitor about Caroline and her efforts on this issue of both menstrual equality and period poverty, and how she came up to this bill and how important it was to her and her school. So she also wrote a letter. She's now at the University of Pennsylvania studying nursing. We're really proud of her. But she wrote a letter to talk about how important this law was once it went into effect. In 2019, this bill had unanimous support from the committee. And when Governor Sununu signed it, he said, this legislation is about equality and dignity. It will help ensure young women in New Hampshire public schools will have the freedom to learn without disruption and free of shame or free of stigma. So it was a really nice, bright spot in 2019. Prior to 2019, the issue really was that schools were doing it differently everywhere. And I spoke to Paula McKinnon, who I also gave you a letter from her as well, from the School Nurses Association, to really talk about, she talked to me through about how it was before 2019.
One minute left.
Okay. There's a lot of, I'll let her words speak for themselves, but she really appreciates this law being in place so that all schools are really giving students what they need in the location of need. Particular issues are, I went to school at Pinkerton Academy in Derry, which is a campus, and for the school nurses to have gotten to every bathroom, that would have been impossible. There are 20 buildings. We are hearing actually that there is some non-compliance with the existing law now. So if there's anything to improve upon this bill, it could be the compliance aspect of it. I also know that there are a couple of myths and ideas about this, that students are stealing products, but you really can't steal something if it's free. Certainly if it's a scarce item, students will want to take more of it at first, but once they realize I'm sorry, I'll just finish up very quickly, I apologize.
Time is up.
Once they realize it's there and it's not scarce, they will take only what they need. And we have behavior issues in the bathroom and in classrooms, in the lunchroom, but we don't take away products. We deal with behavior issues. And so that's something that I think should be addressed in a school by school way.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Steve Woodcock.
Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow members of the committee. My name is Steve Woodcock, and I am a representative from Conway. I was not a prime sponsor, but I spoke on this bill twice. Was at this committee before. It was passed 5-0. It was passed on the House 211 to 135. My good friend Representative Edwards' intent is my concern, and I'll tell you why. You've heard some of the history of the bill. There was one school out of almost 200 that had a problem. It was a K-8 school. That's administration discipline, folks. That's not students. This bill came in because each school was allowed to determine how they were going to assist students that needed product. From teachers to phys ed classes to women happened to be the card or those things. And I brought the case to one. I'll tell you exactly why this bill is here. When I was coaching sport, I had a women's softball team, high school team, 10 schools in a rural district. The first day of the season, they hadn't won in 2 years, true story. And we have a new team, a new coach, I'm all excited, right? And I look around and my shortstop's not there. Why is she not there? I said, where is she? Coach, she's having her period. She doesn't come to school. All we have is white uniforms. And she bleeds through. So I started to follow up with this. Of course, you heard from the young ladies via Rochester. And what we found is if you take an average young lady with heavy flow, we're talking, and I have a daughter, right? A daughter, and you're talking 3 days, give or take, right in the middle of heavy flow. That's 3 school days. That's 10 months. That's 30 academic school days that these kids, mostly low income from rural areas, are losing education. Huge cost. Well, that's why it's there in a local bill. This is no more than toilet paper as needed in the bathroom as it does for women. And the reason we want it in all non-gender bathrooms, in all female bathrooms, and available so that they would come to school and there would be classes and there would be instruction and the embarrassment would be gone. The health issues would be taken care of. So it's not a case of schools needing more help here. It's a local issue. The local schools will take care of it. And all this does is say, you know what? We can't put it back in the principal's office because you aren't going to wait in line. You don't have to wait in line at the nurse's office. You go in like any normal young adult woman and go do your business, take care of it, and work the other way back. That's all this bill is. I suggest, and if I said Senator Ward, I'm there in favor, please check that. I put the wrong box. It should be in opposition. This bill should be ITL'd. It should be left exactly where it is and let these things work. We're talking about one school we've heard about, and that run on female product, and that we heard that right at the beginning, and that is absolutely correct. In some of these smaller income schools, when the kids started, there it is, free Tampax or free tampons, actually napkins, but in either case, they took it. Oh, this is great. And then that slowed down to a hue and cry when all of a sudden, you know what? It's there every month. I don't need it. And we're not talking high-class stuff here, folks. We're talking generic, low level, just to get through the day. If you're really concerned about education, this puts kids back in the classroom 30 days per year that wouldn't be there that need it the most. Simply as that.
Thank you. Question? Senator Gendro.
Thank you, Chair Warden. Thank you for taking my question. And I don't know if this is statewide or not. Maybe you have heard of it, maybe you
Okay.
haven't. But I have heard some stories of men and women taking the tampons, soaking them in a narcotic, and then putting them in a cavity in their body. Have you heard that? And I haven't heard that it's widespread in New Hampshire, but that would be very concerning for me if that's the case. And I don't know how this would all fit in.
Right.
Any-
The availability of that product being a tampon versus a napkin, but in either case being diluted with some type of narcotic, came from the prison system, came from the correction system, and that history of that implication. That's not these kids. We're talking about kids that need help to have a napkin because they can come to school. It's why we've heard about that for 10 or 15 years. You're absolutely right, Senator, but nothing we've seen in public schools that I'm aware of at all. And I was in public school for 30 years. I never heard it.
Okay.
That.
All right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, my
Senator
pleasure.
Fenton?
Thank you for being here and taking my question.
Absolutely.
I just want to clarify. So you are opposed to this bill?
I'm opposed to changing it anywhere it is. We have a bill in law right now since 2019. It's worked for 3 years without problem. We're talking one little school here, but I'm sure it's all little schools, but that's a discipline issue. We had no problem with this bill should be ITL'd, but this is just like paying for toilet paper in a public school. Let it be a regular product, let it be part of the regular routine maintenance, which is what they're doing now. It's a regular maintenance. They put it in, they take out, things are working fine.
Follow up.
So it works now is what you're saying?
Absolutely. The way the way the law is right now should be this bill should be just ITL, in my opinion.
Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. Thank you very much for being here this
My
morning.
pleasure.
Just one quick question. I understand that you think the law should stay as is, and I agree in large part, but we've also heard that expanding the grades where this is offered would be beneficial. And so that would mean that we would have to actually move on this and
Right.
amend it in some form.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I don't think it should be, and I'll tell you why. Because we spent hours in education and on the House floor and research on, because there's so many different configurations, as you were all aware. 4-4-4, 4-8, 7-12, all those things. We found the best medium place was where we have it now. That does not preclude any school system from saying, you know what? We have active fifth graders and they're starting to have the period early. We know it's 10, 11, 12 instead of 13, 14, 15. Then maybe we should do that because working the rest of the school, maybe we should do that. And they should do it if they choose to see that need and they have the opportunity to do it just like this. But I wouldn't put it in law because every school is so different.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Senator, my pleasure. Thank you.
Now we have Mike from United Way.
I noticed you actually gave up altogether on the last name. I appreciate that.
I can make something out, but
It's okay. Thank you. I have written testimony that I'll be providing you. Good morning. I wish to speak to you regarding HB 129, an act relative to menstrual hygiene products in schools. My name is Mike Affelberg. I'm president of the United Way of Greater Nashua. Since 2021, we have partnered with our local schools in Nashua to work to increase and improve access to feminine hygiene products. We call our program Rosie's Pantry and are now partnered with 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, a high school, and the community college, along with our friends from Girls Incorporated. All of which is to say we have gained some expertise around supporting feminine hygiene access. In its first iteration, as introduced, HB 129 would have expanded on current state law RSA 189-16A to require the State Department of Ed to provide funding for feminine hygiene products. Current state law requires the provision of such products in public, middle, and high schools throughout the state in gender-neutral and female bathrooms. As it didn't reduce availability, but provided for increased funding of this critical need, we considered that to be a bill which we would have supported. However, the amended version of HB 129 before you today is one which we must oppose. The amended version of HB 129 not only strips out the funding, but also removes the requirement for provision of feminine hygiene products in bathrooms and leaves it entirely up to schools to simply make them available to all menstruating students. The school would have no funding and be forced to decide if, where, and when to provide these items. In our opinion, that is not a good approach. In practical terms, the best way to support young women who begin menstruating is to make feminine hygiene products available as broadly as possible, thus reducing the factors of stigma and cost. The best way to ensure that no girl ever miss a day of school due to having her period is to make sure that menstrual products are available in both bathrooms as well as in places like nurses' office and guidance departments. We know from discussions with schools that some girls will feel more comfortable going to one place or the other, and due to their own circumstances, which could include their socioeconomic status or their ethnic or religious background. We would encourage you to go back to the drawing board with HB 129 and ask that you consider making feminine hygiene products available in schools, including elementary, as we know that girls today begin menstruating as early as in the 3rd or 4th grade. That these products be considered as normal and freely available as hand soap and toilet paper. That we understand that some girls are embarrassed or stigmatized about menstruation, and that we also understand that lower income girls cannot afford these products, which are not covered by programs like SNAP. As an organization which works to partner with our local schools through the provision of these items through our own work, we would like to think that all public schools in New Hampshire should consider the health and educational outcomes associated with free and unfettered access to menstrual products. Thank you for your consideration.
thank you. Any questions from committee members? Seeing none. Senator Lang.
Thank you.
Yes,
So,
Senator.
as I read the amended bill that came over from the House, this would include elementary schools.
Well-
Because it crosses out middle and high school and says attending public schools, which would include K through 5.
It says all menstruating students. Right, but
It would include K through 5 if there's a menstruating student in the 5th grade in a given public school at elementary level.
it could, but it leaves it also up to the schools to interpret where and when that is. I think that it would be better for us, if you look at when the feedback we're getting is that we have 3rd graders and 4th graders who frankly are surprised when they get their first period, and sometimes are from backgrounds that are stigmatizing in terms of what that actually might mean. In general terms, yes, but I think it would be better to be prescriptive and include elementary schools.
Follow up?
Follow up?
So again, we're not arguing about the what, we're arguing about the how, right?
And-
How it's deployed, not what, because this would include all schools K through 12, but it's where we choose to place it and how the school chooses to distribute it. That is the discussion point.
Our preference would be K through 12, absolutely in bathrooms, and also in nurses and guidance offices as available, as allowed. And there are kids who will feel more comfortable going to the one versus the other for a variety of reasons.
Thank you.
Any others? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Jeff Monroe. And 3 minutes.
Yes. Madam Chairman, and Senators, thank you very much for your time. My name is Jeff Monroe. I'm CEO of LifeSpace Innovation Group. We represent EGAL Pads on a Roll. And I'm here to talk to you about that. I was in Washington DC advocating with senators and actually at the White House 2 weeks ago that this is going to be going federal. But right now it's in 23 states, and to the point, this menstrual products are not as expensive as somewhat as the budget is say. It's between $4 and $5 per student. The state of New Jersey is funding it at 15, and that's way too much. So I just wanted to, I was here part of the state representative for New Hampshire, and I'd like to see it in K through 12 and high schools. I'll give you a story. I was with 23 school nurses last Saturday, and everyone said that they could use, this is a roll that goes in a toilet paper roll that doesn't take a dispenser that costs $300 to $500, and it's very accessible, very easy to use. And I'm not just here advocating the product. I'm here to say that the period poverty is a big deal. It contains, as the gentleman said earlier, the state representative said earlier, it makes up about 4% of lost school days per year nationally. So I'm a huge advocate for the state of New Hampshire as well as all states, and I'm here to say that there are other ways to make these products available. Period poverty is a huge issue, and it does interfere with education in some cases. So
Thank you.
thank you, appreciate it.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much. Representative Tanner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Representative Linda Tanner. I represent the beautiful towns of Sunapee and Springfield. And I've spoken before you before, so you know that I was a lifelong teacher, 35 years, physical education and health at Kearsarge Regional High School. Period poverty is a real thing. Having young women, young girls not showing up at school because they don't have the proper products to control their periods is a real issue. And they're forced often to use toilet paper, paper towels, or even rags. Because if they don't have money for food, and SNAP doesn't cover any of the menstruation products. And when this happens, or when a young woman comes to school or a young girl comes to school, even if she does have a product and needs another pad because her period is flowing heavily, and I'm sure most of us have had that experience at some point in our lives that are female. And if you use a tampon or a pad too long, it's leads to irritation, infection, and at one point toxic shock syndrome, which is a life-threatening disease. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration as well. I want to, as far as hijinks in schools, yes, it does happen. The boys use the girls' locker rooms, the visiting boys team, and I would often come in and find sanitary napkins or tampons or the machine itself broken. And this is a discipline problem. And I would go to the athletic director and talk to him about, or her, about contacting the other school and having the coaches have a little talk with their teams. This is a discipline problem and also a problem of information. And it's often corrected very easily. So I think that the hijinks problem is something, again, that's kind of a local control issue. As far as stigma is concerned, I want to tell you just a short story. Phys ed teachers are very close to janitors. We make friends right off the bat because it's a very good relationship to have. And one janitor was constantly complaining that in the girls' locker room, the toilets were getting clogged with tampons and pads. And I said to him, there's an easy solution to that. And he said, what is it? And I said, put a disposal in the bathrooms between the stalls. And he said, well, there's a waste paper basket there. They can just go and throw it in the waste paper basket. And I said, young girls, even adult women, are very hesitant about walking out in front of other people and disposing of a tampon or a napkin in the waste paper basket. I said, just try it. Just put one. And he put one in, put several in the girls' locker room, and no problems. So the stigma is real. Probably one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to young girls or women, menstruating people, is that they actually show bleeding. It shows through on their clothing, and then they're rushed home or whatever. They go to the nurse's office. But this is a real issue. I think a lot of people just don't even, it's not in their radar. So
Your time is up, I'm sorry.
okay, so I'm opposed to this bill. I think the original bill was great. I don't understand why every year since then we've had a bill to change it. So that's
Thank you.
and I'll take any questions.
Questions from the committee members? Seeing none.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Now I have Amy and Alex, Ken or Carr.
Can, yeah, thank you.
Ken,
Here's a copy for each one, thank you.
are there two of you or one of you?
It's gonna be me and then her.
Okay,
I'm Amy Can. I'm an attorney and a parent. And I can tell you, vague laws are problematic. It leaves room for discretion. And right now, we already have some non-compliance issues. My daughter will describe one that happened to my niece recently, where they're just not putting any products in the 6th and 7th grade classes, the bathrooms. So I'll let her tell about that story, but making a law that appears to expand things is actually the opposite direction that we need to go. We need to be very specific about what schools are expected to do. And I understand a principal's frustration, but that's nothing compared to 42,000 students' humiliation and embarrassment. There's 3 key factors I outlined in there. We've all talked about that. Last witnesses were excellent. Period poverty, real problem. 1 in 5 girls miss school because of it. We have a real problem with period stigma. That's a society's issue that we need to tackle. Girls as young as 9 years old are starting their period. 47% of girls have left school early because of a period accident. Sports and gym participation drops for 6th and 8th grade students. And I think one of the witnesses mentioned coaching experience around that. And the third issue, and I think you'll understand this, Chairperson Ward, as a former healthcare provider, is the serious health factor related to wearing a pad or tampon too long. There's bacteria, there's rashes, there's odor, which is the last thing you want as a young person. Toxic shock syndrome has killed 5 people, 5 under 21-year-olds in the last 12 years. And caused 666 admissions to ICU because of it. And that's what happens if you don't have access to pads, is you wear that pad, you wear that tampon too long, and it creates a health problem. So for lots of reasons, please oppose this bill. If anything, we need to make it stronger. I'm fearful about even changing anything though right now, and then it kind of, being repealed. So in any event, thank you for your time, and I'm gonna yield to my daughter.
welcome, Alex.
Morning. Right now I'm a junior in high school at Spalding High School in Rochester. I was here 5 years ago as well. I was in 7th grade speaking. And I'm disappointed that this is being, that I'm here again, just talking about this. One of the biggest things was the damage to the school bathrooms, but it's just more damaging not having them there for these girls. Because think about the kids who just don't have them in there. So they go to the nurses and say they need more than one. They're embarrassed to ask for a couple more. If it was in the bathrooms, they don't have to ask. They just grab a couple more if they need it. With the whole SNAP benefits and all that stuff. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous. like my cousin's story, she was asking to use the bathroom. Her teacher as well wouldn't let her go until the next student came back, and she goes to the bathroom and there's no pads or tampons in the machines. Our schools aren't enforcing it already as much as it is. I mean, so it just makes it this bill being opposed, makes it more difficult for these kids. I mean, as much as the school's already not enforcing the pads and tampons being in bathrooms. So, yes, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank
Any-
you.
Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
She's done.
Sean Parr?
Good morning. Thank you for the chance to speak, Chair Ward. My name is Sean Parr. I'm on the Manchester School Board, where I sit on the Policy Committee and I chair the Education Legislation Committee. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of the Manchester School Board, which has authorized me to oppose this amended bill, which removes the requirement for public schools to make menstrual hygiene products available in school bathrooms. We certainly support making these products available for free in all schools so that no student misses out on learning for lack of a basic necessity. We also support funding this currently unfunded mandate. And while we appreciate the removal of grade levels to unrestricted age of availability, the bill in this amended form does not fully support students. It's crucial that menstruating students be able to access these products in the school restroom without including the bathroom requirements specifically in this RSA language. Districts may only allow students to access these products by visiting the nurse's office, which can create a school environment that makes students feel self-conscious and even stigmatized about their period. We urge the committee to reinstate this language and consider funding this mandate. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Deborah Brooks.
Hi there. I'm Deborah Jordan Brooks. I'm an associate professor of government at Dartmouth College. I also run a website focused on global menstrual hygiene with my students at Dartmouth. I'm her.net. I am her.net. And so I focused on these issues largely on a global scale, but also it comes up in the US context. And I was here testifying in 2019 on the House side and the Senate side on the original bill. I was brought in after the language was already written, but I found it to be an interesting and illuminating discussion, much like the one here. People are making really, really good points. As a political science professor, I love telling the story about that original bill because it's a real credit to New Hampshire. At the time, I believe we were the 5th state to do anything on the topic and the 3rd one to do it in more than just low-income schools. I believe those were the numbers. And now it's up to, I've seen numbers of 21 as of 6 months ago. I heard 23. It's probably up there now, and there's a bunch more in process. I predicted at the time that New Hampshire would be a leader on this issue, and that's turned out to be correct. And so I'm here to just testify against this amendment because I think it takes out the one of the 2 most important provisions. Yes, menstrual products would still be required to be available, but it would go back to the problem that we were often dealing with before, is it was located in an inconvenient, non-private location in nurse's office, teacher's drawers, whatever, and some places not at all. They weren't accessible or kids didn't know where to get them. And that's a problem. I think people have hit really well the issues in general with lack of privacy, convenience and so on for your general student population. I would just add to that one thing that was really powerful in the 2019 testimony from these amazing young people that spoke. They were just so powerful. One was this thing that we forget about as adults, but like the speed at which you're rushed through your school day and the high consequences for coming to school late. It's just so important. My own kids have, depending on the day, 5 to 10 minute passing periods. just being able to go to the bathroom and clean things up when you have your period is more time consuming than just going into the bathroom under normal circumstances. If you have to go to a second location, possibly wait in line to talk to a nurse or other adult, get the pad, go back to the bathroom, you may end up with a tardy pass. Your teacher may be mad at you. And these things, in addition to normal anxieties and embarrassment around menstruation really combine to make the idea that you have to have these things located in bathrooms for them to actually be accessible. To that, I want to add the idea that period poverty, I mean, the only thing more stigmatizing to a kid than menstruation in many cases is poverty. Right? I mean, having to admit to other people that you don't have money to buy something as basic as menstrual supplies. These are the kids that have to keep going to the nurse over and over while they have their periods to get them. They are the ones more than anyone. Everyone benefits from having them in the bathroom, but especially these young kids. I want to just make one more point on this, quick one. And that is, the reason relying on individuals to look out for the needs of young women is something we've depended on historically in society. And it hasn't worked. I mean, we still have, when we just rely on individuals' judgments to elevate or care about or make equal the needs of girls and women very often, not always, but very often lose in that. That's why this bill was created and forwarded. That's why it was leadership in passing it. And I hate to see its main mission undercut by changes now to a bill that has made a huge difference for a lot of girls and women in New Hampshire. So,
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Saying none, thank you.
okay, thank you.
That concludes the hearing on House Bill 129. Okay, next we have House Bill 550. Representative Fellows. Welcome.
Morning, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
So I passed out my testimony, and I'll keep it short because it looks like you have a long day ahead of you. The process of opening a new charter school begins with the creation of a 501c nonprofit. The Board of Trustees of that nonprofit submits an application to the State Board of Education. On the application, they must explain their vision of the school and address more than 50 areas of responsibility, including how they will manage closing the school and disposing of assets and liabilities, and that's called a dissolution plan. The main purpose of this study committee is to identify what needs to happen when a charter school must close. At least 6 charter schools have already closed, so this is not a hypothetical situation. And it's also not a simple issue because the charitable unit of the State Department of Justice has oversight roles because the charter school is a 501c3, and that's governed by federal statutes. And the Department of Education has oversight because they're a public school created by the state and governed by state statutes. And since charter schools are funded primarily by the state, maybe, I'm not saying for sure, but maybe, the Department of Administrative Services should have a role in property disposal, which in the future could even include real estate. That's an element that's in the current version of HB2. So, with assistance of these 3 state agencies, a committee can produce a comprehensive report on current practices related to financial management and dissolution and financial solvency. And also address and identify the responsibilities and the financial liability for the state and charter schools and the board of trustees of the charter schools, and make recommendations for dissolution procedures and also for procedures that might reduce the likelihood of a charter school becoming insolvent. So the scope of this study starts the items of what they will study begins on line 22 of the bill. And these items were developed with input from the State Department of Education, the Department of Justice, and the Division of Administrative Services.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you.
Okay.
Representative Tanner doesn't want to speak, but she's in favor of this bill. Anybody in the audience who would like to say something? Come on.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Diane Quinlan, and I serve as the Director of Charitable Trusts at the Attorney General's Office. The Charitable Trust Unit of the Attorney General's Office is responsible for protecting the public's interest in charitable organizations and assets devoted to charitable purposes in our state. We are not taking a position on House Bill 550. We're simply here to provide some information to the committee. I've distributed some written testimony. In New Hampshire, charter schools are organized as charitable corporations that are tax exempt under Section 501c3 of the Internal Revenue Code. They're governed by a separate board of trustees, and they're subject to the oversight of our office. As a result, charter schools are required to register with and file annual reports to our office. Those annual reports include financial reports, which typically are the Form 990 they file with the IRS, as well as information concerning conflicts of interest, their board of trustees composition, and other governance matters. When charter schools and other charities registered with our office dissolve, they're required to submit a final report to our office that includes an explanation as to the disposition of their charitable assets. It's important to remember that charter schools' assets may consist not only of assets they receive and funds they receive from the state, but also assets that they receive from private sources. Some of those gifts may be subject to one or more restrictions on their use, and the school has an obligation to comply with the terms of those restrictions. So privately donated assets can be restricted in terms of their purpose. For example, I give these funds for the purposes of building a playing field. Or time, oftentimes there might be an endowment established, so that would be forever. Or both, purpose and time. I give $1 million, the income of which shall be used for the purpose of supporting the debate team. In general, when a charitable corporation dissolves, its unrestricted charitable assets must be distributed in accordance with the Articles of Agreement, which contains a dissolution provision. That's not necessarily the case with respect to restricted assets, however. It may be necessary for the Superior Court or the Probate Court to approve a change in purpose of certain donor-restricted assets. So, for example, if a donor donates a building to a charter school for the sole purpose of operating a school, the school can't simply dissolve and distribute the assets to the state or another charter school without court approval. That's because once the school accepts a restricted gift, it's obligated to comply with those restrictions. In the past several years, our office has become aware of several closures of charter schools. Occasionally, we are aware of the financial problems before they close. Other times, we read about them in the paper. So this, the current law does not require that our office be notified ahead before closure. So we're providing this information for informational purposes. If I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, Senator Lang?
Thank you for taking my question. So simply put, a 501c3 already has all kinds of conditions and terms that are required for disposal of properties that are federal, that are probably takes precedent over any state law we pass, because under federal law, they're required, it sounds like, for certain disposal processes.
So in order to obtain 501c3 status, the organization must submit its articles of agreement or its governing documents to the IRS. And one of the things the IRS looks at is what does the organization say is going to happen to assets upon dissolution. And what they want to see is that the assets do not go to a particular person or a for-profit. It has to go for another nonprofit purpose or the government. That's what they look for.
Follow up?
Follow up?
And so my second question is around restricted property, which is different than everything else we're kind of talking about. And a restricted property, in the event, could a provision be made that, again, we'll talk about a building, right? A building's donated or endowments donated, $1 million endowments donated with the proceeds of the endowment going for scholarships, whatever else it goes for. And at the dissolution, can there be a provision that would go back to the original donor, or do you have to do that cypre process?
Most of the time, you have to do a cypre process. So when someone donates a gift, that donor intent needs to be honored regardless. So if the donor dies, for example, they leave money in their will for a particular purpose, there's no one to take that property back unless the will specifically says in it, this property shall be used by the school for this purpose. If it does not, it needs to go to another charitable purpose, and here it is. So if that's what the donor expressly says, then the school needs to honor that purpose.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Right, thank you.
Anybody else in the audience who wants to chime in on this particular bill? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on House Bill 550. Next, we have House Bill 572. And again, there are a lot of people wanting to speak, so I will limit any speaker to 3 minutes. The bill sponsor is Representative Hall.
Good morning.
Morning and welcome.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Muriel Hall, and I represent the people of Bow and Hopkinton District 9. HB 572 is relative to the eligibility for free school meals and is the product of extensive interim study work that involved many community stakeholders. This bill passed the House Education Committee on a 12-8 bipartisan vote, as well as a full House on a 201 to 177 vote. The intent of this bill is twofold. One, to help support a wider range of low to middle income families by raising the eligibility cap for free school meals to 300% of the federal poverty level. And two, to fund the cost of providing these free school meals through the existing federal reimbursement program, combined with the newly considered supplemental state reimbursement program through the Education Trust Fund. Kids' access to school meals has been curtailed at a time when food insecurity puts tremendous stress on families, particularly given the current food price inflation, as well as the costs of gas, housing, utilities. This bill ensures that our most vulnerable children and adolescents receive at least one, and when possible, 2 nutritious meals per day. Hunger, childhood hunger. That's what this bill is about. No child should go hungry because of circumstances beyond their control. Having taught more than 3,800 New Hampshire middle school children during my 40-year teaching career, I understand full well the importance of food in a child's education. School meals play a critical role in a student's attendance, well-being, and academic success. A healthy diet can give a child the energy to think, work, and play. During testimony, an administrator stated that the toughest part of his job as a school superintendent was having to make the decision to cancel school, not because of angry parents, but because knowing that some kids would not get a meal that day. HB 572 does not attempt to feed every child, only those whose families meet the income eligibility guidelines. At a time when considerable attention has been given to the state's surplus revenue, shouldn't we be considering what we need in addition to what we want? What we need to do is end childhood hunger in New Hampshire, and this bill is a reasonable start. Taxpayers provide students with computers, textbooks, internet access. We can do our part to ensure that our kids have something in their bellies when using these tools, at least during their school day. We're asking kids to be their best selves under the worst of circumstances. We can and must do better than this. Now, the majority of the House is committed to assisting Granite State families in reducing food insecurity and expanding the opportunity to feed those who need it the most. I urge you to please join us and vote ought to pass on HB 572. I'd be happy to answer any questions, but I'm guessing the folks behind me probably have more information than I have, but I'll give it a shot.
You must have practiced that at home because you got 3 minutes.
Oh, was it?
Yes. Thank
Good.
you. Thank you. Any questions from any other committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jacqueline Coe.
All right. My name is Jacqueline Coe. I am Superintendent of Schools in SAU 24, which includes Stoddard, Ware, Henniker, and the John Stark School District. In our schools, we have been doing a lot of work with something called Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. We know that there is a large variability of need in our classroom. And the idea behind UDL is to design the learning environment to meet those needs rather than retrofitting to the learning experience after the fact. In general, accommodations in place for a specific student will benefit all the students in the building. Universal School Lunch during the pandemic had the positive impact on all students and their learning in my district, and I strongly am in support of any effort to increase eligibility and participation in our school meals programs. We know we have families facing food insecurity, and we know when students are hungry, it negatively impacts their academic performance. Efforts to decrease this source of stress for more families will have a positive impact overall for students. Children in particular are vulnerable to hunger, and school meal programs help to ensure that all children have access to nutritious meals. On a related note, as another basic needs issue, just like free and reduced lunch, menstrual product availability is an equity issue, and our schools are totally capable of handling the disciplinary issues, and I urge that the products remain mandated in the bathrooms.
Okay. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Lang. No, wait a minute. Wait. You have to answer questions.
Don't get out of that hot seat that fast. So in your district, how many students would that increase from the free and reduced current numbers to now under this guideline? How many students do you have? How many currently are eligible for free and reduced? And how many do you think would be eligible based on a new 300% number?
So I don't have those exact numbers, but I would anticipate, so we have 2,000 students in our district. Right now, roughly, there are 4 different districts. And so if we have about 20 to 25% who are eligible. And so I anticipate we'd have more than half our population who were eligible.
Follow-up? So you say out of the 2,000 students, currently roughly 500, is the high side.
On the high side.
Currently covered under free and reduced, and if we increase that eligibility, that would go up to 1,000.
Yes.
Last question is dollars. And what does that mean in terms of dollars? What does it cost to feed the 500, and what would it now cost to feed 1,000?
We do that through this, we get federally funded reimbursement. So I don't have those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very
Thank you.
much. Megan Tuttle.
Good morning, Megan Tuttle, President, NEA New Hampshire. I will keep this short because I know there are a lot of people behind me and they have much more information than I do. Basically, we are in strong support of this. When kids are fed, they learn better. That's really what it comes down to. When your basic needs are met, you're ready for school, you're ready to learn. This bill does potentially increase the number of children that would qualify for free meals. And for some children, as we heard, school is where they get their meals. And so that's very important. As we know, school meals really are the only ones that some can count on. And if you're not sure about that, look at the number of weekend wagon programs that there are around the state. Here in Concord, almost every school has one. Lots of schools around the state have end 68 hours of hunger. If kids weren't going hungry, we wouldn't have to have those programs. So that's it. We're in strong support. I'll take any questions.
Any questions from Tuttle? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's Ellen or Glenn from New Hampshire Food Bank. Eileen. And what was your last name?
Liponis?
L-A-I.
Liponis.
Okay, thank you.
Eileen Liponis, New Hampshire Food Bank. I'm honored to be their executive director. We are here in support of this bill. There has been a tremendous strain on our communities over the past 3 years, and it doesn't appear to be letting up. As the backbone of the charitable food system in the state of New Hampshire Food Bank is the only food bank, and we have 400 partner agencies throughout the state. Last year, we did almost 17 million pounds. We did 17 million pounds the year before. Pre-COVID, we were doing around 13. The agencies and the food bank are strained, and it doesn't appear to be letting up for us either. This bill would provide a tremendous addition to the architecture of available food flow in the New Hampshire and ease that strain for families and students. First and foremost, we know it's about the nutrition the children are receiving at school that they need to thrive. But it's also about the normalization and the socialization of children around food, and it scuttles my two biggest enemies, shame and stigma, to the fringes. It brings children together over food. Let me tell you about some of the feet on the ground and stories that we hear. During COVID, we did 3 mobile food pantries a week. In 2020, we did 2 a week in 21. We're doing 1 a week now and continuing to do 1 a week. Pre-COVID, we maybe did 6 to 10 a year, privately funded. So that volume is not going away. Last week, I was up in Gorham. One family told me that their SNAP allotment had dropped from $875 a month to $275 a month. That's 2 adults and 4 children. I had 5 women tell me they had given up protein. I had 4 people tell me they'd surrendered their pets because they could no longer feed them. And I had 2 women tell me that they had taken in their grandchildren and they ate like horses. Our summer meals program has tripled the number of sites, and we're seeing the strain again this summer. The meals produced in our production kitchen went from $2,500 a week to $6,000 a week. And I know there's no fiscal note on this, and that can sometimes be an excuse not to pass something. But I know a bit about meal costs, and I'd like to say for the 162,000 students that you have in the state of New Hampshire, you could probably feed all of them 1 meal a day for around $500,000. And I don't know who's paying for that, if it's a federal reimbursement, if it's a state reimbursement, but I tell you, it's a deal, take it. The children need it, the families need it. The stress that's put on the families and the stress that's taken away when they know, I don't have to worry about my child in school. I know that there's a meal there. I hope you support this strongly.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you. Now we have Mike Appleberg. I paid attention last time.
Excellent. Thank you. Good morning again. My name is Mike Affelberg. I'm president of the United Way of Greater Nashua. For many years now, we've partnered with our local schools to increase food access. This has included the creation of a Share Carts program in the schools, which has made it possible for uneaten items to be given from one student to another in a safe fashion, as well as working to create a coupon or a voucher system called Meals Matter that allows students who don't otherwise qualify for free meals to still access food they cannot otherwise afford. As a practical matter, there are many reasons why more readily available access to free meals creates positive outcomes for the students in our communities. Sometimes it is difficult or embarrassing to sign up for free or reduced meals. And in particular, signing up for reduced cost meals can be stigmatizing, as these families and students in the middle don't often want to ask. What HB 572 would do is effectively eliminate this middle category by would effectively eliminate this middle reduced category by increasing access to free meals when a family is up to 300% of the poverty level. The result will be that no student will go through a school day without adequate nutrition when they cannot otherwise afford it. I would ask you to ask yourselves, when considering this legislation, how well can you learn and concentrate, as well as sustain any kind of physical activity if you are hungry? How well does your brain function when you aren't adequately nourished? Can you really think about much of anything else except for your next meal? I know for me, the answer is definitely not. So I would want or ask you to support this bill for these reasons. With so many other concerns these days, including the high cost of fuel, rent, healthcare, transportation, etc., it seems to me that the last thing we would want is to create an environment where kids don't have enough to eat in school. Yet that is exactly what our current system is doing, namely punishing kids for being poor. And the disparate educational outcomes are evidence of that system not working. Therefore, we encourage you in the strongest possible terms to please support HB 572 and work toward universal nutritional access in our school settings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from committee members? Seeing none.
Thank you very much.
Sean Parr.
Thank you again. Hello again. For the record, my name is Sean Parr. I'm on the Manchester School Board. Today I'm speaking on behalf of the Manchester School Board, which has authorized me to advocate for the expansion of eligibility for free and reduced meals for our students. The expansion as proposed in HB 572 will help ensure nutrition support for children and families struggling with inflation and economic pressures. We know that access to nutritious meals improves student mental health, physical health, academic performance, and overall success. Expanding eligibility for meal eligibility provides greater stability for those in need, allowing them to focus more on their studies and less on worrying about where their next meal will come from. And we saw firsthand how important increasing access to meals could be during the pandemic, so we know that this bill would make a significant difference for our students. We're therefore unanimous in our support of increasing the income eligibility for free and reduced school meals to 300% of the federal poverty level as proposed in this bill. We ask that you support HB 572 and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah House.
Good morning, Senator
Good
Ward,
morning.
members of the committee. I'm happy to be here. Deborah House from the American Federation of Teachers, New Hampshire, and I'm here on behalf of my members to strongly support this bill. We support feeding hungry kids so that they can learn better in school. It's that simple. A student who is persistently hungry, who isn't getting enough to eat at home because the family just doesn't have enough resources to keep nourishing food on the table, is not available to learn. use a little education jargon. There's a saying in education, there is no Bloom's without Maslow. Bloom's taxonomy is talking about the difficulty of tasks that you assign to try and have students show that they are learning. And Maslow, of course, is meeting all those basic needs. You can't get them to learn before you meet the basic needs. So a student who is not food secure is less able to focus on learning. There are more issues with behavior. Expanding the availability of free lunches to students means that more students will get their needs met. More of our students will be able to then focus on their learning in school, and more of them will be getting what they need to out of their education. It's that simple to us, and we really strongly urge you to pass this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you
Okay.
very much. Nancy Vaughn. Okay. Do we have them here?
Is there anybody on the list for Department of Education?
No.
Testify on this bill?
No.
Yes.
Melissa White is here, yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sandra Ward, members of the committee. For the record, I am Nancy Vaughn, Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association in New Hampshire. We are strongly in support of House Bill 572 today. I am not going to read my testimony, but I do have testimony to share with you, written testimony, as well as several letters from volunteers expressing the reasons why they are supportive of feeding more children in public schools. You've heard a lot of the information that I would have shared as well. My written testimony highlights some of the scientific evidence, the studies behind school meals. We know it's good for children's nutrition. There are studies also tying it to academic performance. So this is a win-win for children as well as our economy, basically. Children who are fed more nutritious meals, particularly if it's with, school meals. They're very nutritious since the 2012 guideline changes. They're actually more nutritious than a lot of the food sent in to children from home. So to have more children than just those who have traditionally been able to partake in the free and reduced category of meals would be able to partake in these meals. We've heard that there are children right above that income eligibility that are coming to school hungry, some of them with no food at all. And if they do, it's not as nutritious as we'd like to see. So modeling good behavior goes into adulthood. And as we know, children who do better in school also become very productive adults. So again, I urge you to read through my testimony. I have some information on the fact that the American Heart Association also is promoting equity in nutrition security, and this bill contributes to that goal as well. So I thank you very much for your consideration of this bill, and hopefully you will opt to pass it.
Thank you. Questions from the committee members? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jessica Gorhan.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Senate Education Committee. Thanks for hearing us today. I have fact sheets that I'm handing out that will give you all the reasons why we should support House Bill 572 and all the benefits it will have for the community. But I want to take this time to read a letter from a school food service staff person who is also a community member who receives, her children receive free and reduced meals at school. She really wanted to be here today, but wasn't able to get the time off of work. So I'll start with her letter. Dear New Hampshire Senate Education Committee, hello, my name is Tricia and I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I am writing in support of House Bill 572. I'm a parent of a child on free and reduced lunch, and I'm also the lunch lady at his school. I live in a neighborhood full of families, some like me who are single parents, and others who are two-parent households also treading water, barely scrounging by. Since I am a familiar face not only in the school, but also in the neighborhood, many families and I speak to each other about the struggles we face. Additionally, I volunteer and sit on the program committee for Gather, a Seacoast food pantry. I see firsthand the stress families have with the increased rents, utility costs, and grocery prices. This stress, undeniably, no matter how hard we try, trickles down to our children. I see children, young children, who worry if they have money on their lunch account. Children I have gotten to know who share stories of their mom who works 2 jobs as a housekeeper. Those 2 jobs keep her from being eligible for free and reduced, yet barely keeps a roof over their head. That child who is afraid to get hot lunch because of the cost, who is not hungry. When adults tell her to get hot lunch, yet will come to my office and see what snack items I have purchased that week with my own money. In our district, we do not deny any student hot lunch regardless of what is owed on their account. However, children often hear parents talking or are nearby when parents get bills in the mail. It does not matter how many times I tell a child not to worry about their lunch account. They do. I was the same way, just much older by the time I began to worry about it. I do not think I have to remind anyone that children need food to learn. However, nowadays have to deal with so much more than you or I did at this age. Food should not be one of those things. House Bill 572 would take and remove the burden of choosing which day your child would have a guaranteed nutritious meal. Some people would argue that the poorest of the poor are the most vulnerable. However, my personal and professional opinion is that House Bill 572 reaches some of the most vulnerable families, those families who make too much to qualify for any assistance, yet not enough to survive. A 2-bedroom in my neighborhood, the current rent is $1,775 per month or $21,300 annually. This is more than I made in an entire school year being the lunch lady, working 6.5 hours per day for the school calendar year. To qualify for free lunch, I can only make an additional $5,322 to pay utilities, groceries, gas, and pray no emergency car repairs are needed. I want to point out this is based on gross income and not what actually comes home from my paycheck. I am a working single mother who, with every contract increase, I worry about how close I am to the limit. That dread limit where I might push you over the edge, but yet you don't make enough to make up the difference. And who will it affect the most? Our children. The same children that you want to strive to get ahead in life for. The same children who are the reason you get up and go to work every day, and sometimes at night too. The same children you are trying to raise and therefore run out of enough hours of the day to work any more hours of the day. The current guidelines are set to such unlivable standards where it is impossible to make any sort of living wage and qualify for the free and reduced program. We are taught at an early age in this country, if you work hard, you get ahead in life. These standards fail us. These current guidelines show us working families that if you work hard, you need to work harder to make more money, because the second you try to get ahead, you are met with a cruel reality that you simply can't afford the necessities. This legislation will help children's overall emotional and physical well-being. And as a parent and a school nutrition food service worker, there will be undeniably a better outcome for students, faculty, and our community as a whole. Thank you, Tricia LaBelle.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Aubrey Friedman.
Madam Chair, committee members, Aubrey Friedman from Bridgewater, private citizen. I speak in opposition to this bill. First of all, the program was originally started for poor families back in the 1940s. And currently, for a family of four, the cap is 39,000. This bill would increase it to 90,000. So this is no longer the poor. This is clearly going into the middle class. This is a drastic step upward to include the middle class. And I'd say the worst thing about this bill is it increases dependency. If you have children, that's your responsibility to provide food for them, not your neighbors. And by not only the poor, but the middle class, you are making more people dependent on government, and that's the wrong thing to do. We should be encouraging people to try to be successful, to take care of yourself, your loved ones, your family, and this is just the opposite. It'll be free. Well, we know it's not free. This is, of course, the federal program only covers currently it covers 130%. This is going to go all the way to 300%. So the federal government only covers up to 185. So the difference between the 185% and the 300% is going to be by New Hampshire taxpayers, many of whom don't have children of their own, and they'll be forced to pay for other people's children. So another problem to note on this one is the administrative. We have the federal program, it's the USDA, it's done by local officials. This will create a new state program, and even the note at the end of this bill mentions that it'll say extra costs for state and local officials for staffing and administration of programs. So it's basically two programs for the same thing. So there's going to be a bit of an administrative hassle. And the last thing is all this extra cost and dependency, entitlement, and everything. There's no guarantee that the nutrition of the kids is actually going to be better. These school programs, actually lunch programs, they're mostly processed food, and there's no guarantee that the kids are actually going to be eating better and that this will reduce childhood obesity, which is a problem. So for those reasons, I oppose the bill.
Thank you very much. Questions from the Senator Lang?
This is going to sound a little antagonistic, but it's not meant to be. So we've heard from testimony earlier today that we talked a lot about nutrition being tied to the ability to be educated, right? Having clear mind and having nutrition to be able to support it. So as I look at this, it's about $480 per student that would qualify based on the current meal cost of free and reduced lunches, which is $2.97 per meal times, a student for 180 days. So my question is $480, I'm sorry, and the other fact I'm looking at is it costs an average of $21,000 to educate a child in the state of New Hampshire. So is $480 a year against $2,100 a good return on investment to possibly increase scores and increase education?
Well, that's always the argument, a little bit more and a little bit more, and it'll be better. But if you actually look at the proficiency results, they're pretty dismal. I know in my SAU 4, we're looking at 50s, 40s, and 30% percentiles for proficiency, ELA, math, and science. So you could say, yeah, let's give them more and it'll be better results. I don't think so. I think actually bringing a bagged lunch would be just as easy. And you're modeling the wrong thing to kids. Everything is free. It's not free. So they're learning the wrong lesson there, to be honest.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Melissa White.
Melissa White, Division Director for Learner Support at the Department of Education. I'm here just to answer any questions that you might have regarding the implementation of the program, potential costs of the program, and any other questions you might have.
Senator Lang. Okay.
And the sheet that I provided is really just information based on the 2018-19 school year, and then also data from 2021-2022. So it doesn't have the the cost is indeterminable at this time because of the inability to predict how many students would actually qualify for that 186% to 300% of that poverty level. If we look at the information provided by the census and the poverty rates done on New Hampshire, 300% of the federal poverty level is looking at about $90,000 for a household of four. So if you look at the median household income for 2021 for the state of New Hampshire, the median household income is $83,449. So it's difficult to anticipate. I mean, that's about 60th percentile of households falling into that 83.8 thousand, 100,000 per year. So I think that it's difficult for us to determine exactly how many students would qualify for that. Therefore, that is difficult to determine. The other piece too is that we can give you a cost of what we anticipate it would be to cover those reduced students. We have the number based on the 2021-22 data, and we have 5,197 eligible students for reduced lunch. And so we can say that that cost out of pocket is 40 cents per meal. And so we anticipate, that could be 375,000 just to cover the cost of the meals, of lunch, I should say, specify lunch, covering the cost of lunch for the students that would be on that reduced from 131% to 185%. So that's the cost for that.
I guess I'm ready for my question now. So again, I'm looking at numbers and costs and those kind of things. And so my question is, and I'm going back to my school board days when we were talking about full day kindergarten compared to K plus or kindergarten programs that were federally funded. And my question is, are we supplanting the free and reduced lunch program by putting in a state law that would require us to absorb the entire cost instead of being able to still participate, because now we have a state law that says we have to feed every kid up to 300% of poverty level?
No, I don't
Whereas we
believe
were adopting
so.
the-
I'll double check that. That's a great question. I don't believe it would, but I can double check on that piece of it.
Thank you.
The cost of the, for free lunch right now, if we're looking at, that is, 28,000 students, there's zero cost to us right now. So we would just be covering the cost of the students for the reduced portion of it. When we get into the piece about the 186 to 300%, the meals are set at the local level. So it can range from 356 to 450. So it's difficult for us to ascertain exactly how much we would then have to pay. I mean, we probably would have to look at maybe setting a rate or something for that to specify the amount that the state would be willing to reimburse at the local level. But currently how the process works right now is that we have two routes really that we can go into determining whether a student qualifies for free or reduced meals. The first route is the direct certification through TANF or SNAP. And so that information is provided to us from the Department of Health and Human Services. We get that data file that comes over to the Department of Education. We then go in and match that up, not by student, but by town. And then we're able to provide to that town a list of students that are families that qualify for those benefits. And so then they're able to direct certify, and they don't have to fill out an application form specifically for that. The second route is for a family to fill out their application, the federal application. And that's really a self-attestation of saying this is, what our income is. They provide that to the food and nutrition representatives at the local level of the school or the LEA. They take that in, they go through a process where they verify, but there's no actual providing of any documentation. It's really a self-attestation. And then there's about 3% that the U.S. Department of Agriculture requires at the local level to go in and kind of spot check. And so they'll go and pull a couple of files and say, okay, could you provide us additional information on whether pay stubs or some sort of documentation that says that you qualify. But that is not done for each student. And so that's where we kind of get into the concerns about the filling out of the forms. I know there's been a dramatic decrease in the number of families filling out the forms to qualify for free and reduced lunches. For the 186% to 300%, there is no current system implemented to be able to collect applications. We couldn't use the federal form, so we'd have to develop our own process. The local level would be responsible for collecting that information from the parents to see for the qualification. They'd be responsible for doing the verification and then providing the data to us, but there's no real way for us to do that now. We'd have to implement a system and create sort of a data system to be able to collect that information and then be able to, verify it and then pay for those meals. And we work currently now on a reimbursement system, so the local education agency provides us the information on the meals and then we pay them. So it would have to probably be something similar to that.
Follow up?
So, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but as the bill's written, the current funding source for this is the Education Trust Fund. However, in HB2, which was recently passed, it says that if we pass this bill, the actual source will be the state operating budget. Does that cause the Department of Education any concerns?
I'll have to double check on that one. I don't have an answer to that one right now.
It's the first time, Madam Chair, I've ever seen where they put an if-then clause in the budget. They said, if this passes, then we're going to change the bill to match a new set of guidelines. So.
Any other questions? I have a question. Maybe I missed it. These numbers that you have given us is what is currently happening.
Correct.
You have not made any estimate of what is going to happen if we go from 1 up to 300.
It's a very rough estimate. We did provide it to the LBA. I think they're currently checking our figures right now, but it could be anywhere from 20 to 70 million.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Laura Milliken.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Laura Milliken. I'm the Executive Director of New Hampshire Hunger Solutions. I will have to submit my testimony online, as I realized here that I didn't print out the second page, so reading from my computer. So not reading, I will not read. Many have talked about the benefits of school meals, so I'll skip over that. I just wanted to point out that 130% of the federal poverty level, which is what free meals are currently set out, is an annual income of $32,318 for a family of 3. So given an income over twice that is needed to support a family of 3, we know that the current eligibility level leaves many hardworking families in New Hampshire from accessing this critical support. And it means that many children are hungry in school. We often aren't aware of how widespread financial challenges are across the state. And that was made really clear to me recently. I was in the waiting room at one of my medical providers, and I overheard 2 receptionists talking to one another. And one was extremely distressed. She said her children's school had just told her that her children were not eligible for free and reduced meals. She made too much money. She said, they don't know about our expenses. Apparently, they're not allowed to consider those. It's just based on income. And that's true. And here was a woman with a full-time, reliable job in a professional office who was having trouble making sure that her children had enough to eat. And she's not alone. It's really widespread right now. We all agree that children should have equal opportunities to succeed in school and in life. We accept that all children should have transportation to school and have access to the books they need.
We don't provide these resources based on families' income. Access to meals is even more fundamental to student success. Children cannot learn if they're hungry. School meals are important not only for children's physical health, but their mental health. Raising eligibility would help reduce the shame that often leads children to refuse free meals and go hungry, instead of letting their peers find out that they're poor. We know that stigma is a common barrier to participating in school meals, so we should be looking for strategies that will reduce stigma. And 572 would help to do that so that more children can benefit from improved health and learning outcomes of kids who participate in school meals. Finally, raising eligibility would help to streamline the government processes and reduce administrative burden. We currently have a 3-tiered system. This would remove the reduced priced category. Raising eligibility would eliminate the reduced price category. So this bill is an investment in New Hampshire's future, and I hope you will vote ought to pass because every child deserves an equal chance for success in school. Thank you.
Thank you. You do well. 3 minutes. Any questions from the committee members? Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to? Okay. Just state your name and keep it down to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'm on the list, probably second or third name, but that doesn't matter. Steve Woodcock, representing Conway.
On the other list, not this one.
Either case.
Okay, that's all right. Go ahead.
Want to present different perspective. This bill is co-sponsored by teachers, superintendents, school board members, principals, and former directors of education. This bill is co-sponsored by people who live in rural towns, suburban, cities, as well as towns and villages. I had the same numbers as they have the DOE before you, probably don't mind. We're asking that you consider going from $55,000 to $90,000 family authority. You heard, as we did in the subcommittee, the study committee last summer, last fall. Our interim study committee last year was not a committee that met 2 or 3 times and called it a day. We spent hours and hours and hours, heard testimony from the Heart Association, 68 Hours for Hunger, New Hampshire Solutions, and on and on and on. Now, with this, in all due respect to one of our fellow speakers, the nutrition pyramid and nutrition ingredients in school lunches today are significantly different than what they were 10 or 15 years ago when we did hear about the processed foods and no value food. They're highly nutritional today, to follow what's happening currently.
Representative Woodcock, can you turn your mic on?
Be happy to. Thank you. What's really important, however, is recognize why did this bill come here? And I'll tell you why. Because one of the things we found last year or doing the study, because of COVID, if you all recall, all school youngsters were fed. So the youngsters were getting free lunches and reduced lunches, those 30-some-odd thousand, 33,000 people, kids, they were getting fed. But the stuff we were hearing was that the lower middle income people in this state, those youngsters who always were taken care of by their families prior to now, could not afford it. We've heard from teachers and from schools and from social agencies that it was that low middle class family that's they're now out in the cold people that can't afford it. And those kids aren't used to going to lunch, going to school and getting lunches, going to school lines and waiting in line for that. So we recognize right then that that's the issue. I mean, we would have loved to, particularly me, put in the entire COVID piece, $111 million that all schools should be fed. All youngsters in school should be fed. That's what we should be doing. We're not there yet. We recognize that. I would suggest to you that Maslow, having been an old psych teacher, Maslow said food and shelter. And those of us who've been around a while, I'm from the old Deming School as well. I listened in finance to Representative Weiler say, well, let the Senate figure it out. Let the Senate figure it out. Well, one of the things Deming used to say, it's all about leading and not about managing. So it's suggesting to you the Senate can figure it out, as they normally do when we get these types of bills. So I would just leave you with this, that every person who works in the education field has recognized, who currently works there now, recognized the value and need of students having food and shelter. This is something we can do. And the one thing that Deming closed almost all his presentations were with this, and I'll leave it with you. We all have the responsibility for the well-being of our community. You folks have the opportunity and responsibility for the well-being of the middle school youngsters, the high school youngsters, the elementary school youngsters who have no food on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me ask all these questions. So my question is, so currently the House just passed 601, which is the direct certification bill, which will probably dramatically increase the number of people on free and reduced lunches currently.
Right.
Do you think it's also wise to pass this?
Well, thank you for the question, Representative Senator Lang. Knew you from the old school. Senator Lang. That's not going to expand to the middle class people. All that's saying is we have, as we all know, youngsters currently who are parents who have not participated in or didn't know how to participate in, were never aligned with it or couldn't do it, in the low and free and reduced lunch categories. So this is not going to change that income level. All that does is say to those folks that couldn't do it before, didn't understand how to do it before, here's the better opportunity for you to be able to opt in to this program which you didn't know about. But it's not going to reach the 187 to 300. And that's what we're trying to go with this bill. All it does is take what you're talking about, Senator, and allow more folks who had qualified, just didn't know it, or couldn't figure out how to do it. So I agree with DOE. DOE's got to do some work to figure out a plan from 187 to 300. But that's just management. That's administration. That's confusing paper. Schools will do it as they have in the past. So I don't think, and to answer your question more directly, no, I don't think the direct certification is going to increase the group we're trying to get to, which is 187 to 300. It will improve the 0 to 187, absolutely. And I think it's a hell of a bill.
Thank you, Representative, and for taking my question. We have a lot of programs that help low-income parents. We have an Education Freedom account that helps low-income parents choose schools. I think that's 300% of poverty level as well. And it sounds like this bill, which potentially is 300% of poverty level, will help, again, low-income parents be able to afford school lunches for their children who are going hungry. Is that correct?
I would agree with you that, and I'd say it expands it to low middle income parents. The EFAs have a capacity of 300% exactly for those folks, but this is for food, and food doesn't qualify into the free and reduced lunch because that's 187. And so you're absolutely right. And that's what that 300% number was not picked out of air. Clearly, it aligned itself with a commodity we already know in this House and this Senate, that 300% is the level we use for a figure of where the aid could be provided. And that's what that is. You're absolutely right, Senator.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you allowing me to speak maybe tardy as I did the form correctly.
Now we have Representative Oregon.
Thank you very much. I'm Representative Timothy Horrigan from Stratford County District 6, the town of Durham. And I strongly support HB 572. I would have been happy to co-sponsor it, but this is a very popular cause, and they used up all the spots on the masthead, which is fine. I've sponsored other bills trying to expand student meals. So, I mean, ideally, during the pandemic, of course, that was a very unusual situation, and we had extra federal funding. We actually gave every kid, at least in my school district, a free lunch, and that was like an extremely popular program. You know, even with the parents whose incomes are far above 300% of the poverty level. So I actually, and maybe I don't want to repeat the exact number that the House Finance Chair gave, but he gave a grossly exaggerated number in the newspaper story, which I read today in the Union Leader, and perhaps I'm the only person who reads the Union Leader left in New Hampshire, but he was. This is the school lunch program. It's heavily subsidized by the federal government. It's going to continue to be subsidized by the federal government. Well, not just because feeding children is a very popular cause, but also it's good for the food industry and farmers and agriculture. You know, actually, a lot of those programs began more as a way of supporting farmers, and feeding children and their families was sort of a byproduct of it. But anyway, so this is a very popular program. I think you should probably make it even 300%, and I would not worry about the cost. The incorrect number that we saw in the newspaper today was actually like not that much lower than what it would cost if all the subsidies for the program went away and we gave all 170,000 kids a free lunch totally out of state funds. So like what he cited was just absurdly out of line. And even if it was correct, I think it would still be worthwhile, because feeding children is just about the most important thing we can do, because a hungry child can't learn, and actually, for that matter, food is one of the things that we want children to learn about too. So I definitely urge you to support this bill. If you make any changes, it would be to make that 300% number even higher. And so that's my that's what I have to say about this. I'd be happy to get any questions if anybody wanted to ask me them.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Representative Horgan? Thank you.
Good thing Representative Woodcock answered it much better than I could have anyway. So thank you. So vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience who wants to chime in on this bill? Yes, sir. Did you sign it? No. Okay. Look, down, state your name and keep it to 3 minutes.
I'll do my best. Thank you. LCOX. And I feel like I've read all your profiles, so I feel like I finally get to meet you now, and this is wonderful. I'm just here in support of the bill. A lot of times you've heard the facts and the figures, but I'm more of a personal story. My mother was an 8th grade dropout. She became a hairdresser. My dad was kind of a deadbeat dad. So I was always on that poverty level, but not quite on the poverty level. So we never really qualified. And I went through school basically finding out which of my friends didn't eat all their lunch, and which of my friends always gave stuff away, and I would always sit with them, in the cafeteria. But I also had a really good teacher who was a very amazing mentor to me, who kind of had a snack drawer. And I know maybe Senator Fenton's not old enough to remember, but the grape cans of Welch's grape juice, and the Ritz crackers, and the 3, I don't even know the name of them, but the 3 chocolate chip cookies and the wrapping. That was kind of like my my bread and butter for getting through school. But I did go to Keene State, if that means anything. And I remember. Thank you. And I remember being at Keene and going to the cafeteria, and finally, food, right? Yay. And I went to go fill up my milk, and I wanted the chocolate milk, and I filled it up halfway and then started filling it up with regular white milk. And my friend was like, "What are you doing?" And I go, "Well, you have to cut the chocolate milk because it's too rich to drink. You can't drink it just by itself." And he's looking at me like, "Are you nuts?" And I'm like, "No, my mother would do this all the time, because she was like, you just can't drink chocolate milk straight, or it's bad for you." And I literally was 19 years old when when lights shed on me, that I was like, no, my mother was actually trying to conserve chocolate milk and trying to spread it around to everybody. And so that was kind of my awakenings to what my life was growing up, before I got to college. But you heard other speakers here talking about fend for yourself. I mean, I ended up going on to Milford High to teach for 25 years. We are the Milford Spartans, where we're, and a Spartan from ancient Greece was told to go kind of forage, and if you got caught, you got in trouble. But I think if you take away that from kids, that ability to have to try to seek and destroy to find food, that would cut down a lot of barriers. You've heard people talk about Maslow here today, and the lowest level, food, clothing, shelter, relationships, and sometimes money. But the next levels, the second level is safety, the third level is love, and the fourth is esteem, and then the fifth, the highest level, is self-actualization. And you can't really get to any of those levels until you meet the ones below you. So you're talking about kids now who are learning how to dodge bullets and stuff in classrooms, and they need to get to safety, they need to get to love, they also need to get to self-esteem. None of this happens on an empty stomach. And so this is why I can't emphasize. I mean, in 25 years, as a teacher, I kept a drawer open for the same kids because I passed it along like my mentor teacher did to me. And instead of those same snacks, I had a ton of really, really good snacks for all of them. How does that pay off? I was literally one bite away from turning left instead of right. If I had gone the other way and just kind of dropped out of school, because I didn't, my parents, like I said, weren't really role models in education. So it would have been really, really easy for me to just stop. But instead I went on to get my degree. I ended up getting a master's degree from Indiana University. I was a New Hampshire Teacher of the Year 4 times. I was a National Civics Education Teacher of the Year twice. I was our Town Citizen of the Year at Milford in 2013. A lot of this can be traced back to that comfort. I mean, on your page, you talk about liberty. And, liberty is the ability to do something free of restraint. if I was in school and I was constantly, like many of the kids that I dealt with as a teacher, looking to try to find their next meal, that's their focus, not education. And sure, once you feed them, then they get, they can focus. But let's take that away. You know what I mean? Like let's if we can remove that barrier and just be able to give kids the tools. If we're trying to prepare students, we're trying to prepare them academically. Part of that academic preparation is also physical preparation. As everybody here has already said, and as you already know, I know Senator Lang has 4 children, so once you equal or outnumber you, it's even worse, right? Trying to feed everybody is very, very amazing. And if we can do that, we can probably at least give kids that, like Teddy Roosevelt used to say, square deal. Let's start them off on the same square. And from there, if they do really well, great. If they turn into a lemon, great. Well, too bad. But at least they were all on the same square to start. You know what I mean? And that's all I'm here to maybe offer support for, is to pass the bill and give those kids like me who weren't poor enough to qualify, but at least, close to that amount where it was a life changer for me to have a mentor to feed me and to also find food. I see the really positive effects of that. And I know my 3 minutes, I'll shut up really quickly. And I have been to that candy store up in Littleton that has like the long mile of great food. So I'm like, anyway, so I'll shut up. But that's all I would like to say. Thank you so much for hearing my testimony today.
Questions? Senator Prentice.
Thank you very much, and thank you for speaking today. So, have you been to Lebanon or anywhere in District 15?
I have, and I admire you for all your emergency. I know you're EMT and you've won a zillion awards from Harvard and all that sort of stuff. And so good for you. I congratulate all your effort. Like all of you are just amazing. I will always say to all my students, anybody who's willing to step forward and put their name in the public arena, I have the highest respect for all of you, because as you know, it's not an easy job. So seriously, thank you for what you do. I work our town voting booths every year in Milford, and it's people like you that obviously make the difference. So, and I'm not saying that to suck up. I'm just saying that because I tell that's the truth.
Thank you, and thank you for coming today. Thank you for sharing your story. Congratulations on your Teacher of the Year awards and all your service in the community.
Well, I don't say that to be braggadocious or anything. I just say that to say, like, look what can happen to a kid who is starving. Like, we're not all losers. You know what I mean? Like, and I know sometimes we get into numbers and it's money and dollars and cents, but the reality is it's people. You know what I mean? And I think anybody given the chance can do some really wonderful things. Just like there's so many entitled kids that are doing some horrible things. Everybody has opportunity to do, and I just want everybody to start off on the same square. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. Okay, anybody else who wants to speak on this bill? If not, thank you. That closes the hearing on House Bill 572. Now we move on to House Bill 604. Representative Cordelli. Are you presenting it?
I guess.
Oh, okay. So Representative Tanner will introduce House Bill 604.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Representative Linda Tanner, representing Sunapee and Springfield in Sullivan District 5. This bill is a very short bill, very simple bill. It's to employ a staff member who is a reading specialist in the State Department of Education. And I've worked quite a bit this term on a bill for dyslexia, testing, and did more information, more info search on reading. And we know that with COVID, reading scores went down. And we know also that reading is fundamental. It's how you learn. And students who have difficulty in reading, who don't receive the corrective instruction and guidance at grades K through 3, suffer tremendously throughout their whole academic career, and really it's a loss of people. So I fully support the reading specialist. The reason that I am here is that I just feel there should be a little bit more, maybe an amendment to clarify what we expect in a reading specialist, because certainly parents teach reading. You know, if you're a teacher at all, you're teaching reading because that's the way they learn, even in physical education. And so the things that I am concerned about is that the person have a valid teaching certificate, a master's degree in reading and literacy, and at least some supervised experience student teaching with students with reading difficulties and working with classroom teachers. The coursework that someone needs because they need to be able to diagnose reading problems. That's one of the things we worked on with dyslexia. They should be aware of cognitive development, language acquisition and development. It's good that they know something about children and youth literature, which is usually really side by side with these other things, curriculum development and literacy assessment. So I'm just asking that perhaps you look at this and see if there's some way with the department that you could come out with a little bit of a description of the reading specialist, so that we know it's not just a person who has taught reading. And that's my,
So you want to have some specific qualifications?
yes. You know, not so specific that it makes it hard to hire somebody, but realize that it's a reading specialist, and as a specialist, they should have a highly qualified background in reading and diagnosing.
Questions from the committee members? Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Chair Ward. Thank you, Representative Tanner. Always good to see you. So you talked about specific qualifications. Do you, and you've mentioned some of them, do you have language that we could work on to amend this and insert them in there? Or are you looking for rule writing that would
rulemaking
authority?
I guess
What do you think?
I would, I think Melissa White's here from the department, right? That I would actually defer to her and to the department as to how something could be definitive in this piece of legislation about a reading specialist. Certainly we use definitions in other bills, other statutes, and that they be cognizant of the intent of the legislation is to have somebody who's highly qualified. I don't have specific language.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Lang.
Actually, to answer Senator Prentice's question, it's actually defined already in the statute 200:60 under Roman numeral 2. It says a reading specialist shall be trained and certified in the best practice interventions and treatment of models of dyslexia with expertise in related disorders, and don't know what that word is. I'm not going to try to pronounce it.
Dysgraphia? Dysgraphia?
Dysgraphia.
Dysgraphia.
As well
Yeah.
as have minimum of 3 years of field experience in screening, identifying, and treating dyslexia and related disorders, be responsible for implementation, professional awareness. So there is a definition in statute that these people will be required to be.
Right, it's, the definition, however, I think does not include that they need to have a specific degree in that particular area, and I guess that's what I think needs to happen. That definition could be an elementary teacher who's simply taken, coursework and worked with kids that are dyslexic, so.
Okay, any other questions, comments?
just to
Thank you very
consider.
much.
Okay, thank you, and I will turn in a copy.
Now, Melissa White.
Good morning, Melissa White, Division Director for Learner Support at the Department of Education. And we are requesting this change be implemented. And it's simply prior, the RSA required for us to put out a proposal, an RFA, or an RFP for proposals, and then secure the services of a reading specialist through a contract. This is merely allowing us to meet the requirements of the RSA without having to contract the services out, that we can have an in-house person or somebody that's already on our team that meets all of the qualifications, provide all of the services, and meet all the requirements that are in this RSA and then the other RSAs that we have related to dyslexia and reading disorders. So it's just the change that allows us that flexibility to hire somebody and actually have that person on staff as opposed to contracting the work out.
Senator Prentice, did you have a question?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Warden. Thank you, Melissa, for coming before us. It's Melissa White.
Yes.
One of my closest friends. She's a town manager at Grantham. Her name is Melissa White. So every once in a while, when they bring up your name, I'm like, wait a minute, who are we talking about?
We might be getting each other's emails. That happens
That
from
could
time to
happen.
time.
So you heard Representative Tanner's testimony, and just in case I missed this, taking the reading specialist and fleshing out the definition to include what the qualifications are for that role.
So currently, the qualifications are pretty specific as far as they have to be trained, certified in the best practices and interventions and treatment for models of dyslexia, have that minimum of 3 years of field experience in the screening and identifying and treating dyslexia and related disorders. So the current requirements are pretty stringent as they are written right now. The addition of a degree, for example, there are not very many programs, higher ed programs, that you can go out and become specifically dyslexia certified or for these type of reading disorders. It could fall under just like a special education certification or a special education master's degree. So I think we would probably want to look a little bit more specifically at the various programs, because by requiring a degree in a specific field really limits our ability. The current person we have right now is pretty well known in the field, very experienced, and has training in best practices and interventions for the treatment of dyslexia and related disorders in multiple programs. So she's not just trained in, for example, Orton Gillingham. She has multiple programs that she's trained in across the board for that work.
Follow up? Thank you. So what I'm hearing from you is, I mean, degrees are important, but certification is what gets us where we need.
Or even that experience and that background.
Okay.
And previously, we had contracted the services out, and we had a local, actually assistant superintendent that had that background and that experience, and she actually served as our reading specialist for several years. And then we were lucky enough to hire our ELA education consultant, and she also has that experience.
Okay, perfect, got it, thank you.
Any other questions? So in 200, paragraph 2, is it listed? I'm just looking at what Representative Tanner suggested. Does it say that you have to have a master's degree in reading and literacy?
No, it says be trained and certified in best practice interventions and treatment models for dyslexia with expertise in related disorders and dysgraphia. And then B is have a minimum of 3 years of field experience in screening, identifying, and treating dyslexia and related disorders. And then C goes on to be responsible for the implementation of professional awareness, serve as a primary source of information and support for school districts to address the needs of students. And so there's the part of it that has the qualifications piece, and then the part of it that outlines the what that person is the responsibilities of that reading specialist and what they.
But is it specific for the academic preparation?
For teacher
For this
preparation
reading
programs?
specialist? A baccalaureate degree, a master's degree? Does it say-
Well, yes, they would definitely have to have a master's degree. don't think you could have all of the experience and background with the interventions with just a bachelor's
But
degree.
it isn't spelled out.
Correct.
Okay. Senator Lang.
So my question is, if we were to try to change that definition, couldn't we dramatically cause problems in our school districts for someone who may not have a master's degree, even though they got 3 years experience and maybe in some other way or form, I'm not sure which, but again, I'm a little concerned if we start talking about changing the global definition of and qualifications of a reading specialist, we potentially hurt our school districts.
I mean, this particular RSA is just for that position that's at the department. And it's not for the positions that are, the certified positions that are serving in schools. This is just the person that's supposed to be at the department performing the responsibilities outlined in 260, but also in 258 and 259.
RSA. Give me a second. Thank you. It's not the way I read it, but okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? Did you have a follow-up, Ms.?
I think
Senator
that when you read it with 258, 259, 260, they all go together, so then it flows a little better. And I think when it's kind of taken just on its own without reference to the previous two, it can be inferred that, yeah, reading specialists would be referring to those working in schools, but I think in the previous two previous two RSAs, it specifies reading specialists and contracted by the Department of Education.
Okay.
I don't have my book. I need have my book here.
Senator Lang, did you want to?
I'm
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see Megan Tuttle. Did you want to say anything? Okay. Then we've heard from everybody. That concludes the hearing on House Bill 604. Okay, so we take some time and do an executive session?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So the one request we had was from Senator Innes asked, he has an amendment for House Bill 349. He asked us to please not exec it today.
Yeah, I know. I heard that from him earlier.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I want to,
Well, should
No.
we go into executive session first?
yes, that's true. I wasn't going to make a motion, but motion to go into executive session?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we are now in executive session. We'll look at some of the ones from today.
I think Sue.
Madam Chair, I want to ask that, that we hold on execing 129. As you heard during the testimony, is consideration of an amendment that would specify increasing the number of grades that these products were made available. And I just want to be able to have an opportunity to investigate that further.
Okay.
So if we could hold on that, and that would be much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, do you want to do anything with 572, or do you want to get some more information? That's the
So, can we talk about
lunch.
So I 572, I'd like to hold on because I want to see what, I guess if I was to make a motion, I'd make a motion to retain that bill. I'm not going to make a motion, and the reason being is I'm a little concerned going too fast with the free and reduced, and the fact that we have this bill, again, like I've never seen it before in the budget that changes the funding source. I've never seen an if-then in a budget before that says if some bill we're considering passes, we're going to change the funding source to this. So I don't think I'm ready to exec that bill until we have more data and more understanding.
Yeah, yes, I don't want to exec that bill. I don't necessarily want to retain it, but I think we've got a little room I have some questions too, and it's that difference between the federal level and what we're talking about at the state and how that gets filled. And actually the language that you brought up, which is a great catch and very interesting.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that. So Yes, can we hold?
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
How about 550? Establishing a study committee.
I would just, if we're interested in that, we should probably drop it down to one senator.
Yes,
There's
I
two senators
made
on
a
it
note
now.
of that. Can make a committee amendment to, instead of two senators, we
Make it a
go
one.
down to one. But other than that, is that something we can,
Although we gotta make sure we don't break that new rule we have that says you have to have more legislators than public members. So
Oh, let's look quick.
if we
'cause
drop a senator, it puts us at 5, which means we have 1, 2, 3.
what was that new
4.
rule? Senator Lang,
We have to,
So
can't have,
there's-
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there was somewhere, and I don't know where we did it, but we passed under chapter 14. We passed a rule that says that if you have a study committee, you have to have more legislators than other people on the bill. And so if we drop the number of legislators, we may have to drop the number of public officials, or we have to add a House member.
Let's add a house member.
I'm okay with that too.
just add a House member. So can we have a committee amendment that on line 8, we reduce the Senate members to 1 and add House members to 5?
Sorry, I'm just going back to my House days and they would be giggling right now. Senator always says that.
How many other people are there on this committee?
So there are 5 members.
Financial.
As I count it.
2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5. So there seems to me
And
that
there's
there will be
6
5
legislators, so
legislators with a 4 and a 1. Yes.
So, maybe we don't go from 4 House members to 5, and we do go down to 1 senator, but item number 5 in section 2 says any other person or entity relevant to the duty of the committee. Are you counting that as the more more others than legislators? Make sure I'm looking.
I don't know. I think
Actually,
we'll
the weird
probably.
part is we can drop it to 4. Leave it at 4.
'Cause
So,
if we got rid of,
there are no
and by
Section
eliminate,
2 is just
yeah, and by eliminating number 5 and leaving it at 4, this committee or commission can, it's a committee, they can call who they want. So having that cited in there makes it gives it the look that I think we're trying to avoid here, which is having more people that are not legislators on committees than aren't. So
Right.
that's what was my point.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, and I guess what I'm saying is I goofed, is that the only members of this committee are legislators. Section
Well,
2 is just they shall seek expertise and advice from. They're not
you're right.
actually members of the committee. So we can just drop the senator to 1 and leave the House at 4 and we'll be fine.
Okay.
I goofed. I read it the same way as
I did
well. Okay. Well, seek and goof, I don't know if those go hand in hand, but we'll do it here. Okay. All right. So we actually.
So we have a committee amendment.
Get her done.
Get that.
Correct, yeah.
One Senate member.
Line 8.
So move to approve as amended.
Second.
So the committee amendment has a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the committee amendment?
Aye.
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 Move on to pass as amended.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of
Aye.
passing the bill as amended?
Aye.
Aye. That's
Move
5-0.
consent.
Second.
Consent? All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
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 That's 5-0. Who wants to take it out?
I'll take it out.
Phantom will take it out. Okay.
You're gonna email me though.
The cam roll.
How about, was we,
So, Madam Chair.
no, 536?
So I'm actually okay with 604 as written. I don't know if anybody else is. I don't think we need to go in and change definitions. The only thing this thing does is give some authority to the commissioner to employ somebody under the same conditions that we currently had, but it adds that new language that says, only adds 5 or 6 words, employ a staff member who is a reading specialist. And so it doesn't change the statute other than whom will meet the terms for a department. Instead of being an outside contract service, it could be an inside person. I'd rather not, without changing that definition, it seems should be its own separate bill. And if somebody wants to go and do that, they're more than welcome to, but I'd rather, and have a public hearing on that change in definition. But I'd be okay with passing this bill as it is. I'll just mention that it came out of the Education Committee in the House 20-0 and was on consent as written.
Senator Ward, Chair Ward, I have a question just of Senator Lang. So contract services, did I hear that you want to strike contract services and just go employ staff member, or have that or?
The bill as written. Right?
Okay.
I'm okay with it just the way it is. It adds that they can either contract or they can employ a staff member as a reading specialist that they can then put out to schools if they needed to.
Okay.
So I'm okay. This grants greater flexibility to the Department of Education to help school districts with reading specialists. So I'm completely okay with the way the bill is.
It also says in accordance with paragraph 2 of 200, so there's a lot of stuff in that thing already. We just didn't write it out here. So you're making a motion that we,
Well, I'd like to have a conversation, I guess, first. If we're 5-0 and ought to pass, then yeah, I'll make the motion. I think it's a good bill as written. It grants some flexibility, allows them to potentially add, not require them to add. If they feel it's appropriate, they could add their own staff member who's a reading specialist in the Department of Education. And I don't see why we wouldn't grant them that flexibility. If they can hire a contract person under the same terms and conditions, they would hire a local employee instead.
your motion is that we ought to pass on this bill.
Correct.
And I'll second that. Any discussion, any further discussion? Seeing us, Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Chair Ward. I mean, overall, I agree. I think Senator Lang is correct that this might, any further definition might need to be actually separate. And having a dyslexic brother who has 3 dyslexic children, I'm really plugged into this and the struggles that our family went through to make sure that they were, including moving school districts, this is in Massachusetts, had the resources that they needed. And that includes people heading up these programs. So I think that this list is valuable and admirable. I'm just not sure it belongs here. Okay. I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much for letting me say that. Thank you, Chair Ward. I'm done.
Okay, so where were we?
Ought to pass.
We have a, ought to pass, and we have a second. Any more discussion? All those in favor of ought to pass on 604?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Senator Prentice? Yes, okay.
I have a tendency to raise my hand. It's an old city council thing.
So ought to pass. That's 5-0.
Move consent.
Second. All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye, that's 5-0. Okay. You want to take it out, Senator Prentice?
Sure. Yes. Yes, and Peter is to not leave the building today. The cam roll.
You're gonna have to
Yeah,
chase
you-
me.
get her on, yeah. Yeah, I'm
Challenge
here
yourself.
for a while, so thanks.
Only fast when being chased.
Okay, what about 536? I know we held off on it because there was some question whether there might be some other things needing inclusion, but there is none. And Senator Lang, you introduced the amendment.
So I'd move my amendment on that bill, on Senate Bill 536, and move amendment number 1225.
Do we have a second? I'll second that.
Wait a minute, I've got to pull.
If you remember, at the amendment to 1235,
The what?
we were okay with the underlying bill. if I remember our discussion right. And what this amendment also did was adds timeline for disposal as a favor to the House, which will go to committee of conference, assuming they don't approve, they want to talk about it. But what we're voting on the amendment is putting the timeline into the law so that if a charter school makes an offer on an unused piece of public property owned by a public school, that there's a process that has to occur and not create the problem that occurred in Winnisquam, which was the school board just chose not to act. And so they were never in violation of the law, but they were also not in agreement with the law. This will force some timelines to require them to either accept or to enter into negotiations. And if the negotiations break down, creates a mediator process with the Department of Education. And then at the end, I think it was to Senator Fenton's point, the question was, why does the charter school have the right to say no if at the end of the mediation they get a price they don't agree with? And the answer is because they're the ones that have to afford it, right? They're the ones that have to make sure that they can afford whatever their agreed upon price is that the mediator comes up with. If they know they can't meet the financial burden, we shouldn't try to force a financial burden on them. And so I'd ask that we just approve the amendment.
Okay, no, I have a question of Peter. We introduced the amendment last time. Did we take a vote on the amendment last time? We did. No, I want to have a vote on the amendment first, and then we'll do the underlying bill. Right. So, move the amendment.
So I just want to speak on the amendment. I am opposed to the amendment, just for, I think we discussed this in the committee hearing. I believe in the original prime sponsor said, we should have fair market price should be in this, and fair market price is not it, just fair price we had spoken about. And also, this came out of one instance, it sounded like, where a chartered school tried to purchase land from a public school. And now it almost seems like, we're holding the public schools hostage, and the charter school gets to make all the decisions in this matter. Like you and I talked about during the committee hearing, it just sounds to me like, the offering chartered public school can accept or reject, whereas it really takes the power away from the seller in this case, in my opinion, if I'm understanding this. That's why I'm against the amendment. I just, I can't imagine myself selling a house and the purchaser deciding whether to accept or reject. I don't want to get to give them that option.
But isn't that what happens now? Right? So now you put in a purchase and sales agreement, the buyer can choose to say no, right? Or they can turn around and say, we want more money for it. And you, as the purchaser, has the right to say, I can't afford more money, so I can't take that offer. I mean, whether it's a car or whether it's a house, it's, again, at the end, when you get to the final dollar amount, it's the person who's going to be obligated to the fiscal responsibility of that dollar amount has to be the one to say yes or no.
So if
not
we already
somebody
have
else.
that, then why do we need the amendment?
But we don't have that. The problem is that the schools are not taking any action. So they're not negotiating. In this case, it was the first instance that we're aware of in the entire state that this law was basically put into effect, right? There was a public school chose to downsize the school campuses from 4 to 3, had an empty campus that was then available to them. So it became the first one subject to this law. The charter school, again, under the right of first refusal, put the offer in, and the school board didn't act on it for over 7 months, just sat on it, doing nothing. And so they basically completely ignored the law, which we said, no, you got to work with the charter school to try to do something. And there was no recourse. There was nothing we can do. There's nothing the school system can do. There's nothing we called the AG. There's nothing the AG can do because there was no process in the law that requires them to at least accept or deny the offer. Even if they just would have said no, that would have been fine. They said, no, we want this much money. And if the school can then say, we can't afford that, so we're going to say no. But they didn't even do that. They offered nothing. So the first time we had an opportunity for the law to go into effect, the school district utterly ignored the law and didn't negotiate with the charter school at all in any way, shape, or form, or didn't even respond to them and say, we're rejecting your offer. They did nothing. And so all this does is put a process that would require them to at least acknowledge and then try to negotiate. And if they can't come to an agreement, let Board of Ed play mediator and say, let's see if what the school district's offering is outrageous and they're acting in bad faith, or are they acting in good faith? And if they're acting in good faith, but the number is low, the mediator could come in with a higher number. And then it's up to the charter school to decide whether they can afford that higher number. I think it's a reasonable process.
The charter school is getting all the power in this deal. Because
They got to pay the bill at the end. They should have the power.
So just the charter school gets the power, not the person selling the land, not the public school selling the land.
Well,
That's what I
their
see the
power
issue
is in the
with this
mediation,
bill.
right? Their power in the mediation is when they show, here's the surrounding values, and this is why we think this offer's too low, and this is the right price. And then negotiate with the mediator to get to a reasonable price for the sale of the school or the empty building. And then, but in the end, the person who has to write the check every month or go get the loan, they're the ones that have to decide whether they can afford it or not.
But that's the problem. The mediator is saying, hey, this is a fair price, not a fair market price. This is the fair price.
I'll concede with you if you want to amend my amendment to add market. I'm completely okay with that. That's a reasonable ask.
But that's just one
everyone
issue.
said.
That's
So
just one issue. So here's the fair price. Mediator says, here's the fair price. And the public school says, hey, that's not a fair price in our mind. But no matter what, they don't get to decide because now the chartered school says, I accept or I reject. They have all the power. The public school loses all that power to sell the piece of land that they're dealing with.
sure. Again, we have a certain, it's a process that they have that puts them on equal footing, but in the end.
But that's not equal footing. It's like,
Sure, it's not the school saying yes. It's not the school setting the fair market price, nor is it the charter school.
But
It's
it's
the
theirs to sell.
independent
They can
real
say whatever
estate
price they
professional
want.
that's hired.
I think
So,
we agree.
all right.
We're agreeing to disagree.
All right, that's fine.
Senator Prentice.
Get from a small hand up to the large hand up. Okay, so, my concern all along, going back to when we first started talking about this 2 years ago, is the actual role of the public, the local community in this decision-making. So that's where I've always had a concern with this, about how these buildings, it's now goes into what Senator Fenton just brought forward, is where the balance of the power is in this decision making, and it's moving away. There's not equality in it. So I mean, putting market language in, market rate, is that appropriate? And market may bring us closer, but what else do we need to do?
I'm looking at this amendment that everything is here that was there before. All we're saying is that you need to give an answer, yes or no, in what is this, 30 days or 60 days, so that we know how to proceed. But if you want to buy something and you put in an offer and you don't hear anything for 7 months, what am I going to do in the meantime? Look for some other property? This just seems to me as a courtesy by the selling school, the selling community, that they have to respond within a certain length of time, yes or no, and then leave it at that. That's not how you see it?
Yeah. I'm appreciative of processes and timelines being put in place, because I think that sets expectations on both sides. But I just don't see in here, looking at, starting with the independent mediator, so at 17 down through really the end of this, where the community has any equity in the conversation. If in situations where the charter school made an offer to lease the property, the appraisals gathered by the mediator shall determine the fair lease price for the offering chartered public school to accept or reject. Maybe that's where my angst is, and it lines up similarly with what Senator Fenton brought up. So I don't know where we go.
Isn't that exactly how we do with union contracts? The school district and the teachers negotiate over a contract, and when there's not an available, when we can't come to an agreement, there's an
There's mediation.
independent mediator assigned, and the mediator then gets language and proposes language to both sides. In this case, both sides can accept and reject, right? What the changes in that modification. The only difference here is the fact that we're talking about a payment that someone has to make as an individual, as a charter school. So I think that in the end, if they end up, the mediator, whoever that is, comes up with a price and the charter school just says, I can't afford that, I'm going to say no. And walks away. Then the school still owns it and can move on to another offer or do something else. But I don't think it's unreasonable to have the mediation occur, because otherwise you just have a school that just says, no, we're not going to do it. And then what do they do? What is the process for a school, for the charter school? If they just say no, or in this case, didn't act, but say 7 months ago, the Winnisquam said, we're rejecting your offer. No conversation.
Senator Prentice?
And then I see Senator Fenton has his hand up. So with union negotiations, when the two sides can't agree, you are correct. A mediator comes in, works to come up with a solution that both sides can agree to. And if one side or the other doesn't agree, then they actually go back to the table. I'm just missing that they go back to the table to work it out. I am missing that other, maybe this is just how I'm reading it. I'm missing that other side. I feel like one, with the mediation, there's a winner and there's a loser. There's not that final place where everybody says, okay, this is where we're at.
That's my issue with it as well. I mean, you know, both sides can accept or reject, but I read this as only one side can accept or reject.
Can I speak to
Yeah, I
the?
don't, but that's.
I mean, line 21, 20 through 22, that's exactly what it says in my opinion. In situations where the charter school made an offer to the lease, the property, the appraisal gathered by the mediator shall determine a fair lease price for the offering chartered public school to accept or reject.
Can I speak to the appraisal part of it?
Absolutely.
So with an appraisal, of course, this isn't an independent appraisal. Usually, in the real estate world, an appraiser will gather comparative market analysis, CMAs. So the chances of them coming up with a price that would be fair, that's already built in. So the appraiser, the independent mediator approaches the charter school or the school and says, these are, and it could be 3 CMAs, it could be 5 CMAs. This is the fair price that I came up with. Now, where do you, I just don't see it any different, honestly, than a house. If you want to sell your house, would you accept or reject if the appraiser said, your house is worth $500,000 and a purchase, you were able to secure a purchase and sale for $500,000? So I really don't see anything in there. And to add market, we could, but it's almost like saying a female girl. It's already assumed that it's a fair market value. That makes sense.
Senator Prentice?
Going back to the initial concern that I heard from Senator Lang about nobody acting, correct? Like it just sitting and waiting. What if that's the issue, then why are we getting into all of this? Why can't we just say there has to be action within 60 days? And if they don't have action within 60 days, then they have to agree upon the time period that they will resolve this in. What?
I think that was the idea.
You're okay until.
I think if we want to, I'm sympathetic to this because I actually have a similar bill that has to do with collective bargaining, with negotiations. If it's time to negotiate a new contract, notice is given, and a response doesn't come back within 10 days, I don't want that to be in bad faith. So what happens is they would say, you know what, we can't do this within 10 days. Can we have an extension? But we are responding to you, so you know what our intent is, so we can move forward. So I'm aligning that somewhat. You brought up the union piece. So that puts everybody on record and on notice. And I think it forces their hand if they're not responding. And if that's the key issue, then let's keep it to that.
That was what you were.
Well, right. So
Yeah.
again, I guess what I get back to is the fact that the real question is if you think the independent mediator who gathers the independent appraisals are going to slant the conversation for some reason. Is a party not, it's someone not subject to the party agreement, right? So again, this is an independent person who doesn't care whether it sells or doesn't sell. Their only point is to get to a fair value. The problem without putting something in there like that is that, again, a school district could say no or be asking such a ridiculous price that is not in alignment with fair market value. And then how do you get to that fix that? The whole point of this is to make sure that it's a fair process, that if a charter school who is a public school comes in and offers to buy a public piece of property, so that they can have their school, that they're not treated unfairly, that a school system, and this is going to get a little messy, but the school system can say, I don't want a charter school next to my high school. And so because it'll make it way too easy for parents to switch to charter schools and do busing. And so therefore, we're going to set a stupidly high price for the charter school to buy this so that we can keep them priced out of the market. How do you fix that? This process is engaged to fix that. So school districts cannot employ their own bias in the process. That it's an independent, they can assume to choose an independent price that was fairly agreed to, that doesn't have politics played into it.
I think, if I may, then we're really going back to the original argument from almost 2 years ago, where we took local control away from school districts on deciding how to manage the property that they own. And I use the example of where I live in Lebanon. We closed 3 schools, combined them all into one, and then established a committee from the school board and the city council, and they worked out the best way and so to use those buildings. Some have apartments in them, some have mixed use where they have one of them has a charter school and a dentist's office and an apartment, and the others, like, again, is apartments because we need housing and other purposes that the community decided. So there's been this, I hear what you're saying, but I think the original argument, which now I'm dragging us back to, was that we took that control away and said, it's the charter school that gets first dibs. It's not the community that can make the choice about how best to use that property. So you just brought me back to a place where I was like, ooh, I had a problem with the start. I don't have a problem with setting timelines, okay? And I don't want anybody to, I am respectful and I think sympathetic is not the respectful word. I hear you. I just think that if we are trying to get this to move, then let's just put a timeline on it and tell them to move. And then, at the end of the day, we can vote all differently and then bring it out to the floor and hear what the other voices have to say. Like, that's all.
Either
So-
that, I think if we can hold off on this thing. Obviously, there are some interpretations that don't agree with one another. Take a look at it and see what we want to come up with. And each one of us can come up with something different for next Tuesday, and then we take a look at it. See how much it agrees or doesn't agree.
And one more point, I don't want the law has passed. So with the law comes the law, and I'm not going to thwart that. So since it's in place, if people aren't complying and doing their business within a timely manner, I have a problem with that. If I didn't agree with it in the first place, that's not the issue, Senator Lang. I think that if the law is the law, then they need to comply. So I just want to be clear and on the record with that.
Okay, we'll hold off
Would
on
you
it.
like me to withdraw my motion?
We'll withdraw.
It was a lot of fun.
Okay, anything else that you think we can dispose of today?
So there is an amendment to, did you get the committee amendment for, amendment to, it's the one we were talking about.
Is it HB 35 with the overeaters?
No,
No.
I haven't done anything with X. I haven't figured.
Student
275.
I just got
All right, so 275 was the bill that talked about allowing parents
For
to
school
pay
tuition.
the differential to a
Yep.
private school if
Yep.
they have tuition schools.
Yep.
So it's 275.
Yep.
Senator Ward, Chair Ward, if I may, since I didn't know we were going to talk about exacting this today, and I was not here for that discussion between the problem with my car, which is now fixed, and having to go and introduce a bill. I actually need to review those hearing notes before I make a decision on this. I think it would be helpful to know ahead of time, like, what we're gonna exact when we can. So I apologize, but I am behind on that bill.
Okay, for all of the bills that we have heard, let's all read the reports. So we can refresh our memory, what took place, who said what, and then be ready to vote on them next Tuesday. How many more bills do we have? let's put them on the next Tuesday schedule. Then we can, then we can spend the rest of the time execing. And if we don't get through, we have more Tuesdays, so. Yeah, well, the, you know, the reports are extremely helpful because you can't remember every point. Yes, Senator Prentice?
Thank you, Chair Ward. I know I have my hand up a lot today. I hear what you're saying and I appreciate it. I guess I've become spoiled with HHS. How Senator Birdsall will like say next week or this week, like she'll give us even the night before the heads up. Here are the bills we're going to exec. So I have the opportunity, you know, and that was actually the first real hearing that I missed. I missed that. So, but we get a list. We know what we're gonna exec, and then we move. And I understand that things can change dynamically, but that I apologize for dragging this out. I just want to say if we could have a list, and we know what we're going to exec and when, that would be great. And I'm just uncomfortable because I missed that.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Do we have,
Can we exec 654? That was the adding a second year to the 1 year certification to deal with the teacher that's, mid-year appointment.
okay, if we can do that.
Should be
Six minutes.
fairly quick. It came out of the House.
Okay, which are you looking at?
So 654, which is relative to 1 year teacher,
Okay,
1 year
just
certificate.
adding on another,
It adds a second year to allow them to extend, somebody's been granted it, and I move OTP on that.
I remember there was a Senator Waters and the came to talk about this. It was about the CTE.
And he was in favor.
Wasn't there? Sorry. Didn't we? Someone testified. I think it might have been the teachers about dropping the probation from 5 to 3
Right.
years as an amendment for this
that was
bill.
another way to Tuttle, who mentioned that she was very concerned because that might be bringing back teachers on probation. That's what she was concerned about.
With Brian Hawkins from NEA.
No, I don't have time because I have to be at a meeting at 12. So,
Again, I think that if someone wanted to do that, it should be a separate bill, because that's a significant policy change from existing law. So this is something that just allows a temporary teacher that's been hired for 1 year and gotten that temporary certification to be able to get a second year certification, finish out a year. So if they're hired in November, they can finish out, basically a year and a half's worth of education, and hopefully by that time, the school could find a permanent replacement if that's what they're looking for within that time frame.
I'm okay. I'll second the OTP.
654, Joe, you all set with it?
654, yeah.
Yep. You have a second from Senator Benton. Any discussion? All those in favor of OTP on 654?
Aye.
Aye. That's 5-0.
Move consent.
Move to consent.
Second.
All those in favor of consent?
Aye.
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 I'll take it out.
5-0.
I'll take it out.
You take it out, Lamb will take it out. Okay.
Please go.
Good. Do that. And I will, we'll do those two bills next Tuesday. And I will write up the remaining bills that we hope to get. Okay? Wait. The thing is, we have a couple of advances that we really shouldn't get done. Okay, do I have a motion to get out of executive?
So
I think,
session?
yeah.
All
Yeah.
those in favor?
Second. Yeah. Aye. Second. Aye. Let's do. Move out.
Or out of executive session?
Oh, I need a second cup of coffee.
Is everybody catching some type of cold? My kids are sick, so